Dunes and Dead Bodies. A Read Wine Bookstore. Cozy Mystery. Book 7. Written and narrated by Laina Turner. Chapter 1. I pulled into the Dusty Dunes Resort and Conference Center in North Beach, Indiana, to a parking lot already packed with cars. My heart raced with anxiety because instead of arriving to the conference with plenty of time to spare, thinking I would check into my room and have time to relax and freshen up, I was late. My son Cody was staying with his dad while I was gone, and right before we were to leave, so I could drop him off, Cody panicked because he couldn't find his football cleats. We spent 20 minutes frantically tearing apart the house looking for the cleats, only to find them in his clothes hamper under a pile of dirty clothes. As a result of that 20-minute delay, I had hit a couple of pockets of rush hour traffic and construction on the highway and ended up 2 hours behind my planned schedule. Taking slow breaths as I pulled up to the valet, I tried telling myself there was no reason to stress. Cocktail hour had just started and the keynote speaker wouldn't be speaking until dinner, so I still had time to unpack and iron the dress I had purchased for the evening as well as freshen up. I got out of the car, ran my hand over my hair to smooth back the strands that had come loose from my ponytail, and walked around to open the trunk and get my suitcase out. As the valet attendant approached me, "Can I help you with anything, ma'am?" the pimply-faced kid asked. I assumed he was at least 18, since he was parking cars at a nice hotel, but he didn't look a day over 15. "Thank you. I can get my suitcase. Here are my keys." As I handed him my keys, he handed me my half of the claim ticket and then affixed the other half to my keys for identification. "Are you here for the conference, ma'am?" he asked, and I wanted to tell him to stop calling me ma'am. It made me feel like a grandma, and I wasn't quite 40. Unfortunately, I realized to him I was a ma'am. "Yes, I am. Have fun. I hope to own a business myself, so maybe one day I'll see you at a conference like this, but not as your valet," he said, grinning. "It's hard work, but it is definitely worth it. I would encourage you to follow your heart," I said, trying not to laugh at his pickup line. As I grabbed my suitcase and headed into the lobby, I felt my body twinge with nervous excitement, ready to soak in all the conference had to offer. I hadn't been a business owner that long. I'd only opened up the Read Wine Bookstore with my best friends Cora and Sally a short while back, after cuts were announced at my old job as librarian at the town library. I still had a lot to learn about operating a successful business. Read Wine specialized predominantly in used books, but we also kept a few new releases on hand, especially around the holidays. We also had a cafe area where we sold coffee, simple food items, and wine. The coffee and food were a great draw, and honestly, some days we sold more coffee than books. I was excited about the all-women business conference that I was here to attend, which was geared toward women's small business owners. As a former librarian, I knew books. Business not as much. My friends and I knew enough to realize that we needed to continually market Read Wine and draw from other towns, not just Romero, where we were located, to stay profitable. We just weren't well versed in how to actually go about doing it. Hopefully the conference would change that. That was the intent anyway, when I had signed up. I reached the reservation desk and I frowned at what I saw. The long line in front of me didn't bode well for getting to my room anytime soon. Shaking off my disappointment, I furtively glanced at my watch and then back at the line, wishing I had a crystal ball so I knew how long it would take to get to the front. I didn't want to risk not getting a good seat for the keynote speaker. I had always been the kind of student who wanted to sit in the front of the class, not wanting to miss anything the teacher said. It was no different now. I wanted to be close to the stage because I was very excited to listen to Cassandra Collins, who had been awarded the title of Businesswoman of the Year. I wanted to soak up as much knowledge as I could. As much as I wanted to wear my new outfit I'd bought for the occasion, it wasn't worth missing out on the real reason I'd come. I spotted the bell desk in the opposite corner of the foyer, and there was only one person in line over there, so I quickly decided I would store my luggage at the bell desk and worry about checking into the hotel later. I would freshen up as much as possible in the bathroom and head to the event. It wasn't like anyone would care what I was wearing anyway, though I couldn't help but feel a small pang of disappointment. It was such a beautiful dress. A few minutes later, I was on my way up the escalator to the second floor where the Chadwick Ballroom was located and where tonight's events were to take place. I walked into the room feeling a little bit better about my casual black dress pants and icy blue cardigan set, when I noticed people were in various styles of dress. One woman even wore yoga pants, although she had on a shirt with the name of a yoga studio. Maybe that was her business, which would explain why she would attend a conference in such casual attire. I went over and grabbed a glass of white wine from a waiter circling the room, and even though there were still 30 minutes left in cocktail hour, I made my way to the front. As I reached the front tables, I mentally patted myself on the back for foregoing dressing up because the first row of tables was already taken. I quickly sat down in the closest seat I could get and pulled a notepad and pen out of my purse, ready to write down all the amazing business advice I was sure was to come. I had been following Cassandra Collins on social media after I had come across her motivational talk on YouTube about the businesswoman's mindset. Cassandra, who was a drop-dead, gorgeous brunette and appeared to be in her mid-50s, owned a very successful dating service that specialized in romantically connecting women business owners with men business owners. Even though I had never tried any dating websites, I couldn't help but think that if I were in the market, which I wasn't, Cassandra's business model made sense. Instead of the normal online dating profile that matched people for dates using technology, Cassandra's company matchmakers personally vetted profiles to match people instead of relying on algorithms on the website. The personalized service came with a hefty price tag, but since Cassandra was successful, people clearly didn't mind the cost. Anyway, Cassandra's business model wasn't what drew me to her. It was her positivity and the way in which she spoke in her videos. The words seemed to be directed to me personally. I watched Cassandra's videos anytime I felt stressed or overwhelmed being a business owner, which was often. It never failed to put things in perspective. The woman had charisma in spades. "Is this seat taken?" A voice came over my right shoulder, jarring me out of my daydreaming. I looked to see a petite, bubbly woman with shoulder-length blonde curly hair and bright green eyes who seemed to be maybe a few years older than me. "Not at all. Please feel free to sit down," I said, and the woman pulled out a chair and took a seat. "I'm Myrtle Moore, but you can call me Tillie." The vivacious woman grinned and stuck out her hand. Trixie Pristine," I said, shaking it. "Where are you from?" I asked, since Tillie had quite the southern accent, and the conference location seemed a far drive for anyone from the South. Tillie chuckled, her laugh high-pitched and sounding like tinkling bells. "It's my accent, I know. I could never pass for a northerner. I lived in Alabama until recently, but now I'm in Sweet Haven, Michigan, getting ready to open a business." "Congratulations. I remember when I opened mine. Well, not just me and my friends, we own a bookstore. It was such a fun and scary time. What about you? What kind of business are you opening?" "A dog bakery. I'm calling it Paw Paw's Pet Bakery." "What an adorable name." "Thank you. I've had a lot of fun researching and planning to get things up and running. Opening a pet bakery has been a dream of mine for years, but now that I'm close to the grand opening, I'm really nervous about the business side of things. I'm a baker, not a businesswoman, hence being here at this conference." We chatted over the next 20 or so minutes, sipping our wine, as the room slowly filled up with other female entrepreneurs. I already felt that I had got my money's worth out of my registration fee just by networking with the women I met at my table. The lights started to dim, signaling that everyone should start taking their seats, and I saw a young woman in a smart-looking royal blue suit walk out onto the small, raised stage at the front. "I'm glad I was able to get such a good seat," said the red-headed woman 2 seats down from me on Tillie's left. She said she had driven down from Chicago, telling us that was where she owned a boutique. I hadn't been able to ask her name as she had sat down right before the lights dimmed. "Can I have your attention, please?" the young lady on stage said into the microphone, and the chatter died down to a small rumble and then dwindled to nothing as everyone listened intently to what she was about to say. "Welcome, everyone. I'm Ashley Houston, and I'm the events coordinator here at the Dusty Dunes Resort and Conference Center. I want to give you a brief rundown of all the fun things the Women's Business Society has planned for you this evening. As you can see on both sides of the room, our catering staff is setting up the buffet. Once everyone has their food and is back at their respective table, your keynote speaker, Cassandra Collins, will be out and will start the evening. Don't worry. We've already served her dinner, so you will be able to enjoy yours while she is talking about strategies to keep yourself motivated during trying business times." The room broke out in applause, and as Ashley left the stage, I saw other hotel staff dismissing the tables in an orderly fashion to go to the buffet. I could tell that we would have to wait a few minutes before being excused, so decided it would be a good time to meet the latest comer to our table. "I'm Trixie Pristine from Romero, Michigan, and I own a bookstore called Read Wine," I said by way of greeting to the redhead. "I'm Tillie Moore, and I'm about to open a pet bakery," Tillie chimed in. Nice to meet you both, ladies. My name is Presley Thurman, and you already know I'm from Chicago and own a boutique called Silk. Funny, I told you these things before I told you my name. My mother would have a fit at my bad manners. Well, we are here for business, I said. Oh, I love Chicago. My mom took me there on my 18th birthday, but I haven't been back since. Now that I live in Michigan, I'm a lot closer, and it's on my list of places I want to visit, Tillie exclaimed. We all started chatting and were soon excused to get food in the buffet line. The event was very well organized, and in no time at all, we were at our seats, digging into the delicious food, and I could see Ashley walking back on stage. Hope you're all enjoying your dinner, ladies. Though don't stuff yourself, because after Cassandra's talk, there will be desserts along with coffee or after-dinner drinks if that's what you prefer. But for now, I want to welcome Cassandra Collins to the stage. Please, let's all give her a big welcome. The room broke out in applause again as a beautifully coiffed woman whom I recognized from her videos as Cassandra Collins came out onto the stage. Dressed to the nines in a sleek, sleeveless black dress with several strands of pearls around her neck and huge rocks on 3 fingers, she grinned, and her smile lit up the room just as it did on her videos. I couldn't help but lean forward in my seat, not wanting to miss a thing. Cassandra took the microphone from Ashley and turned toward the crowd. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. It is my pleasure to be here to kick off what's going to be an amazing weekend full of tips and tricks to grow your business and, more importantly, to be confident as a female entrepreneur. Tonight, I want to start off my talk by... Cassandra stopped and gave a little cough. I frowned because I could see that Cassandra all of a sudden looked a little pale. Excuse me, ladies. I don't think I ate enough of the great food here as I'm feeling a little lightheaded. A small table sat to the side with a pitcher of water and a glass on it. I watched as Cassandra walked over to the table, poured a glass of water, and took a small drink. She walked back to the center of the stage, flashing her smile again. As I was saying, the most important thing is to... Cassandra never finished because she fell to the floor in a heap, and even from where I was sitting, I could tell she was out cold. There was a collective gasp from the audience, and Ashley rushed on stage, as did a couple of women who were sitting at the very front table, all kneeling around her and looking frantic. Someone call 911. Cassandra's not breathing, Ashley yelled. I looked at my table mates, chilled to the bone. What had just happened? Chapter 2. Oh no, what do you think's just happened? I said to no one in particular at my table, worried about Cassandra. Within minutes of Cassandra's collapse, paramedics were at the scene and we watched as they started giving Cassandra CPR. After a few minutes, they loaded her on a stretcher. As they wheeled her out of the room, Ashley came back to the microphone and started to speak in a trembling voice. Everyone, may I have your attention, please? I know you are all worried about Cassandra. As soon as we have more information, I will share it. In the meantime, I hope you understand we need to cancel tonight's talk. The caterers are setting out desserts and coffee, and we will leave the bar open for another hour. Please network and enjoy yourselves, as that is what Cassandra would want you to do. Hopefully, we will be able to resume conference programming tomorrow morning. Please check the big sign in front of this ballroom that will be updated tomorrow to reflect what is happening. With that, Ashley walked off stage, and Tillie, Presley, and I all looked at each other with our jaws hanging open. What do you think happened? Tillie said, echoing what I had been thinking. Maybe she got dehydrated or something and fainted, Presley said. Let's hope that's all it is. And she'll be okay, I said, shaking my head. It didn't seem normal for a seemingly healthy woman to just collapse like that. Do you guys want to get some dessert and hang out for a little while? I asked hesitantly, feeling a little callous in light of what had just happened, but determined to make the most of my time here. I didn't often get the chance to meet new people who also happened to be female business owners back home. I'm always up for dessert, if you can't tell, Tillie said, patting her ample hips with a laugh. Oh, please, you look amazing, but I concur with that sentiment. I never met a dessert I didn't like. Why don't we go get something sweet and maybe a glass of wine? I don't think I need more coffee at this point. We can find a quiet place to sit and chat. I saw a bunch of small seating areas in the hallway, I said, and the other two nodded their agreement with the plan. It seemed everyone else had the same idea because as we got our dessert and were walking around looking for a place to sit, we found many of the seats were already taken. We finally found a place to sit on the next floor up and settled in. Have you ladies checked in yet? I asked, wondering if I was the only one who had been running late. Tillie and Presley both nodded. That's why I was almost late to dinner. I lay down for a short nap and didn't think I needed to set my alarm. My nap turned out to be not quite as short as I intended, Presley said, and we laughed. Lesson learned. Always set your alarm. Being a business owner will do that to you. A lot of sleepless nights, but in the end, it's worth it. At least I think so, I said, taking a bite of my brownie. We talked about business for a few minutes, and then conversation turned back to Cassandra Collins. If she fainted because of dehydration or something, do you think she'll be back tomorrow? I asked, worried about this woman I didn't know personally. I felt I did somewhat know her through her videos and social media. Interesting how that could connect you to a person. No wonder kids these days felt they couldn't live without social media and had best friends they had never met in person. Wouldn't it take longer than one night to feel well enough to speak? I've never collapsed, but it seems like it would take its toll. Though she is a professional, so she might want to get back here for business as usual, even if she's not feeling 100%, Presley said. Maybe she will be back tomorrow. In any case, I don't know about you two, but I saw when I arrived that there is a nice walking path around the grounds. You ladies up for a walk to work off some of the sugar calories from our dessert? I said, changing the subject. Not that I didn't want to talk about Cassandra, but I didn't want to dwell on something so negative. Plus, I needed to walk after the delicious desserts I had scarfed down. That's a great idea, Tillie replied, and Presley nodded. We left our dishes neatly on a side table, not sure what to do with them, and headed down the elevator and out the front doors to the walking path. It was the beginning of fall, so even at almost 8 p.m., it was still a little light out. As we walked down the path, the sky started turning purple and pink as the sun set, and the lighting along the path flicked on, creating a beautiful, luminescent walkway. This was a good idea, Presley said after we had strolled in silence for a bit. I'm sure glad I met you two. I need more friends who are business owners. I have a couple of business owner friends back in Chicago and one in my hometown of Hunters Hollow, but could always use more. It's nice to have people to commiserate with on all the highs and lows of business ownership. I know. I couldn't imagine doing this on my own without my best friends. It's comforting to know between the three of us, we can brainstorm to solve any problems that come up, I said. Do you have any business owner friends in your area, Tillie? Tillie shook her head. No, I've only been in Sweet Haven for a few months and I haven't really had a chance to make a ton of friends yet. I've been too busy trying to get the business ready to open. You said you're originally from Alabama? What brought you to Michigan? I asked. To make a long story short, my grandmother owned a summer home in Sweet Haven, and when she passed away a year ago, she left it to me. I planned on selling it, never expecting to move from Alabama, but then I realized my marriage wasn't working and got a divorce. My son is at college at University of Michigan, so I sold my home in Alabama and came to Sweet Haven. That way I can be closer to him and get a fresh start too. Wow, I don't know if I would have the guts to just pick up and move across country by myself like that, I said. Me neither, Presley added. Not by myself anyway. Well, when your ex-husband is running around the small town that you have lived in your whole life with the 25-year-old bank teller he cheated on you with, it makes it easier. But enough about me. I'd like to hear more of your stories. Since you both are already in business, I know I can learn a lot. I started to tell Tillie how my friends and I came to own the Read Wine Bookstore when we reached two women walking towards us from the other direction. We all smiled at each other and said, "Hi. I assume you three are also here for the conference," one of the women said. Presley, Tillie, and I nodded. You two as well, I asked. Yep, I'm Rhonda, said the taller brunette. And this is my friend Michelle. Michelle was also a brunette, but about 6 inches shorter than Rhonda. Not that Michelle was very short. Rhonda was just exceptionally tall, probably close to 6 feet based on my own 5'8". Can you believe what happened to Cassandra? Rhonda asked. No, we can't. We all just hope she's okay, I spoke for the group. At that, Rhonda and Michelle both looked at each other, exchanging an odd glance that I didn't know how to decipher. You didn't hear? Rhonda asked in a hushed tone, even though no one else was around. Hear what? I asked. Cassandra Collins is dead. Chapter 3. I was struck speechless. Cassandra Collins dead? What had happened? And more importantly, how did these ladies already know she was dead? The thoughts running through my head came out of my mouth in a tumble. We were in the lobby looking at the schedule for tomorrow, hoping maybe the new one was up already, and we heard Ashley talking to some man. The man told Ashley that Cassandra had been pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital and that the doctors were suspicious. Like maybe Cassandra didn't die from natural causes? They didn't see that we were within earshot and were not trying to spread gossip, so please don't say anything to anyone, Rhonda said. Kind of odd they didn't want to spread gossip when they had done just that. I couldn't help but think, but nodded my head, since of course I wanted to hear what they had to say. Of course not. There is a proper way to handle this news without upsetting everyone at the conference, I said. We can't help but wonder what they are going to do. I hope they don't cancel the conference, Rhonda said, though I realize that's selfish of me. Cassandra Collins was the keynote, and I know she was teaching a few of the workshops, but there are other speakers participating, so maybe they will just rearrange things. It's not like it's her conference, Presley said. I can't imagine they would cancel the entire thing. What if there is a murderer running rampant, Tillie said. She was gulping air and gazing around wildly. I didn't really think that was the case, although I could see why she might be worried. Maybe I was the naive one thinking we were all safe. Before anyone could comment, the phone Rhonda was holding in her hand lit up and she lifted it up to look at the display. A smile spread across her face. That's my husband, I'd better take it. Nice meeting you, ladies. Maybe we'll see you tomorrow, Rhonda said, and she and Michelle walked off. Wow, that was not what I was expecting to hear, Tillie said, and I could see a look of worry on her face that mirrored my own fears. You think it's really true? Presley asked skeptically. Do you really think Cassandra was murdered? Why would they lie? I asked. Maybe they're not. Maybe they've just misheard, which is why you shouldn't eavesdrop. Trust me, I know from experience, Presley said with a chuckle. I don't know about you, but now I'm curious. What do you ladies say we head back and see if there's been any official news? I asked more excitedly than was probably appropriate. I was curious. I just couldn't help it. I'm game. I love being nosy, Presley said. Count me in too, Tillie said. The three of us made our way back to the hotel lobby. It was bustling with activity. It seemed like many of the conference goers had made their way down to the lobby, where there was a restaurant and bar. Much like earlier, there were many small groups of people chatting away. I couldn't help but wonder if the people who had broken off in little groups had known each other prior to the conference or had met each other here like I had Tillie and Presley. So far, meeting those two women was the highlight of my conference experience. You know what, ladies? I still need to check in. The line was crazy when I got here, so I left my luggage at the bell desk. I didn't want to miss anything. I'm going to check in really quickly if you both want to go get a drink or something while you're waiting for me, I said. No, I don't need another glass of wine. I'll just hang with you. Then, after you check in, we can do some investigating, Presley said with a mischievous laugh. Same here. Let's just stick together, Tillie said. Fine with me, I said, and a smile spread across my face. I was feeling blessed to have such good new friends. This time the line at the registration desk only had one person in front of us, and I felt relieved I wouldn't have to wait long. I was jittery, more with curiosity about Cassandra than the wait in line. In a few short minutes, the young woman behind the desk was waving us up. How can I help you? She asked. I smiled as I noticed her name tag said Teresa. Teresa, my name is Trixie Pristine, and I need to check in. Teresa typed on her keyboard until presumably she found my reservation. Credit card and license, please. I handed them over and Teresa typed in a little bit more and then passed them back. How many keys? 3? Teresa asked, looking at the three of us. No, they're just keeping me company. It's just me in the room, so I only need 2. I like to have a backup in my purse because inevitably, at least once during a stay, I leave my key sitting on a counter somewhere in my room and don't remember it until I hear the door click shut when leaving. Teresa smiled. It happens a lot. She typed in a few more things, grabbed 2 plastic keys out of the tray next to her computer, and swiped them through a machine, put them in an envelope, and wrote the number 410 on the outside before sliding the envelope across the counter to me. You want to take the elevator bank to your left, and you're on the 4th floor, room 410. I'll have someone bring your luggage up. Is there anything else I can do for you? No, thank you, I said, taking the keys and turning to walk away before I hesitated and turned back around. Actually, I do have a question. Sure, she said, eyes sparkling. She seemed way too chipper for someone working the evening shift, but then I had worked enough customer service to know it was probably her workplace demeanor. Do you know if Cassandra Collins is okay? Her collapsing on stage was so shocking, and we're all really worried about her. Teresa raised her eyebrows and pursed her lips. her eyes darting around nervously, which told me she probably knew something. "Well, we're really not supposed to talk about it," she said, shifting her weight from one foot to another as if she was uncomfortable with the question. I stayed silent for a few minutes, waiting to see if maybe Teresa would start talking to fill the void. Eventually she did. "I heard she was murdered," Teresa said in a low whisper. It was all I could do not to scream out, "What do you mean, murdered?" But I knew that wouldn't be the best way to proceed if I wanted Teresa to keep talking. The way she kept shifting her weight from one foot to another told me she was nervous. "Oh," was all I ended up saying, finding myself at a loss for words. "Do you know how?" Presley interjected. Teresa squirmed. "I don't know." "We won't say anything, promise," I said, making the motion of crossing my heart. "I heard she was poisoned," Teresa said, barely above a whisper, "but you didn't hear that from me." My eyes grew wide, and I glanced at Presley and Tillie, who also seemed surprised. I started to ask how she had heard this, but before I could, someone else walked up to the desk, and Teresa turned her attention toward the new customer. Presley, Tillie, and I took this as our cue to leave, not wanting to talk about it in front of another customer, and once we had cleared the line, we looked at each other. I could tell by the look on their faces they were just as surprised as I was. "Do you really think she was murdered?" Tillie asked. "That seems a little scary if there really is a killer on the loose." "We can't very well start going around to people asking what they've heard in order to corroborate that girl's story," I said. "Although I guess what Teresa told us supports what Rhonda and Michelle said. It does seem odd, though, that Cassandra's just died and these rumors are already circulating." "Why can't we go around asking people if they've heard anything?" Presley said, and we looked at her in surprise. "We can play it casual, mingle, introduce ourselves to people, see where the conversation goes. At the very least, we'll get to meet new women for the effort, even if we don't learn anything about Cassandra." "Good plan," I said, thinking what Presley said did make sense, and we agreed to divide and conquer, then meet later. For the next hour, Presley, Tillie, and I met, and talked to several other women, but none who knew any more than we did about what had happened to Cassandra Collins. While the topic of Cassandra wasn't hard to bring up, as most people were already talking about what had happened, no one else mentioned they had heard she was murdered. I was a little surprised that even if it was a rumor, more people hadn't heard it. We finally decided to call it a night and headed to the elevator. I was the first one to get off on the 4th floor. Presley and Tillie were both on the 6th floor. As the elevator slowed to a stop, I looked at the other two women. "Breakfast starts at 8, with our first session at 9 if the schedule doesn't change. You ladies want to meet for coffee and breakfast?" I asked. "I would love that," Tillie said, and Presley agreed. The doors to the elevator split open, and I stepped through. "Have a good night, ladies." "See you in the morning," I said, and gave them a wave. As the door slid shut, I headed to the left, where the sign said my room was located, and as I walked down the hall, I could hear faint voices that sounded like a couple arguing. Since the hallway was empty, it had to be coming from one of the rooms, which meant either the walls were really thin, which didn't bode well for a good night's sleep, or the couple arguing were really loud. As I walked closer to my room, the voices got louder. When I stopped in front of my door, I realized the sound was coming from the room right next to mine, 408. I paused before putting my key card in the slot, feeling drawn to listen, even though I knew eavesdropping was tacky and rude. It was like the proverbial train wreck. I couldn't tear myself away. After a few seconds, I realized I was being ridiculous and went into my room, determined to put the fighting couple and their private business out of my mind. Except when I went in my room, I realized the walls between the rooms were a lot thinner than the outside wall, and I could hear them as clear as day. There was no getting away from it this time. "I told you to stay away from her," I heard a woman screech, "and I told you to let it be. I had everything handled, and if you would have just left things alone," the man said, but didn't finish because the woman interrupted him. "Yeah, right. Leave it up to you. Look where we're at now. Cassandra is dead. And who do you think they're going to look at first, Robert? They will not. I told you, Anne, there isn't any evidence to tie me to Cassandra's death. No one is going to think I killed her. You had better be right, because I'm not going to let you take me down with you," the woman said venomously, and I flinched, because even with a wall between them, I could feel the woman's anger. Whoever Robert was to her, I wouldn't want to be in his shoes right now. "Don't threaten me, Anne. You know I don't take too kindly to threats," Robert said, matching her tone. "Whatever. I'm going to get a drink at the bar. I don't even want to be around you right now." A few seconds later, I heard the door slam, and then the TV turned on. I assumed Robert was going to watch some television. A hard knock sounded on my door, breaking my attention away from the fighting couple, and I walked to look through the peephole. It was the bellhop, so I opened the door. "Good evening, Miss Pristine. I have your luggage. Where would you like it?" he said as I welcomed him into my room. "Over there is fine." I pointed to a space by the desk. After I tipped him and sent him on his way, I unpacked my suitcase and ironed my clothes for tomorrow. All the while, not another peep came from the room next door. As I crawled into bed, I wondered if I would even be able to sleep. So many things had happened today, and the weekend conference was turning out to be much different than I had expected. Chapter 4. I woke up the next morning after a fitful night of sleep, tossing and turning due to the events of the day, along with being in a new place. I always had a difficult time the first night sleeping in a room other than my own. Typically, it made me so tired the next night I was able to sleep like a dream. I hoped that would be the case tonight. As I yawned, I rolled over and grabbed my phone from the nightstand. It was a few minutes before 7, right before my alarm was to go off. Shutting off my alarm, I sat up and stretched and made my way to the bathroom, knowing a shower would help wake me up and coffee would do the rest of the job. Almost an hour later, dressed in a casual yellow dress and a white cardigan, I headed to the second-floor conference room we'd been in last night to meet Presley and Tillie for breakfast. I arrived a few minutes before 8, so the doors weren't open yet, but there were already a few other early birds milling around. Several women were gathered around the sign outside the conference room doors, which was where Ashley said any important news would be posted. I made my way up to the front so I could see, and the only thing that had been changed were stickers over the sessions Cassandra was to lead with another name written in, Susan Adams. I stepped aside in order to make way for someone else to look when I heard another woman ask in a very loud voice to no one in particular, "Who is Susan Adams?" I paused to listen, wondering the same thing. "She owns Dating in Dollars," another woman said, and I shuffled a bit closer to the women, wanting to be part of the conversation. I'd never heard of Susan Adams or Dating in Dollars, but it kind of sounded to me like another dating service. Was she a competitor of Cassandra's? "Cassandra Collins is going to be furious when she finds out Susan Adams is taking her place," another woman said, which told me that the news of Cassandra Collins's death hadn't made its rounds. It made me wonder, not for the first time, if it was actually true. Was she even dead, much less murdered? The doors opened and the women filed in, swarming around the coffee urns, where the focus turned more toward caffeinating themselves than talking, something I was wholeheartedly up for. As I was stirring a little bit of Splenda in my coffee, I heard a voice behind me call out, "Hey, Trixie," Presley said, and I turned to see Presley and Tillie standing in front of me. "Good morning, ladies. I'll go get us a table while you guys get your coffee, then come on over," I said, as the coffee line had grown long and, even though Cassandra Collins was no longer this morning's keynote speaker, I still wanted a front row seat. I was determined to get as much as I could out of this conference regardless of the bad start. Presley and Tillie barely had time to take their seats when Ashley came out on stage, not looking nearly as vibrant and excited as she had the day before. By the dark circles under her eyes, it didn't look like Ashley had gotten any more sleep than I had. Ashley cleared her throat and asked for everyone's attention, which they gave much more rapidly than the night before. "Good morning. As you can see, we've made some changes to the schedule, and the conference will proceed as planned. We will get started at 9 o'clock in this room with Susan Adams delivering the keynote. In the meantime, enjoy your coffee and your breakfast," Ashley said in a rush and turned to walk off stage. "Hey, Ashley, how is Cassandra doing?" A voice came from another table, and several other women called out the same. I watched Ashley's face grow pale as she quickly glanced around the room, eyeing the exits. I felt that was pretty naive of her to think she could escape without offering some type of update on Cassandra, since all these people had been in the room the night before and had watched her collapse. Of course, people would want to know what happened. Ashley took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the room as if searching for someone to save her. She then paused for several seconds before speaking again. "I hate to break this news to everyone, but I am sad to inform you all that Cassandra Collins died last night." A collective gasp rumbled through the audience, and Presley, Tillie, and I all looked at each other. So it was true, I thought. The room was eerily silent for a few seconds until loud chatter erupted and people started firing questions at Ashley. "What happened? You've got to be kidding me. This is horrible. Those were a few of the utterances among many, with the women all asking the same thing. What had happened to Cassandra Collins? I'm sorry, I know you are all as shocked as I was when I first heard. But as far as the details, I don't even have them, and to that end, I ask that you all respect her family's privacy. I'm sorry I don't have more to tell you. Enjoy your breakfast and coffee. Susan will be out shortly. Ashley all but ran off the stage, ignoring a few more questions being called out. I guess the information we heard last night was correct, Presley said quietly. Yeah, guess you're right about that. I have to admit, I had been hoping the rumors were wrong when we didn't hear anyone else mention it last night, I said sadly, then took a sip of my coffee. I wonder what happened. That's what we need to find out, Presley said. Dead doesn't mean murdered. Maybe Teresa got it wrong. I totally understand giving the family privacy, but it is hard not to wonder, Tillie said. She seemed in perfect health, I said. Looks can sometimes be deceiving. My aunt on my dad's side dropped dead of a heart attack at 35 for no apparent reason, Tillie said. And I grimaced at that thought, since that was younger than I was. Tillie was right, though. You never knew what was going on with someone's health unless they told you. I think Cassandra had 2 kids and an ex-husband, if I remember right from reading her bio. So horrible for her kids, I said, and the other women agreed. We went back to the business of eating breakfast and trying not to speculate on Cassandra's death, but conversation was stilted. It was hard to pretend things were normal when they clearly weren't. When I saw Ashley walk back out to the stage, looking even more apprehensive than she had 30 minutes ago when she had told us that Cassandra was dead, it made me wonder what kind of announcement she had this time. Ladies, Ashley's wobbly voice came across the microphone. I have another announcement to make. There has been another change. We will be pushing back the start of our morning session with keynote Susan Adams to 10 o'clock. This hour-long delay is so the police can talk to us and get more information surrounding Cassandra's death. The pandemonium that ensued was double the response to Ashley's earlier announcement, but Ashley didn't stay on stage long enough to address any of the questions being called out and hurried off as quickly as she could without breaking into a run. Police? Why would the police be involved? Tillie said, a look of confusion on her face. I don't know, but if the police are involved, maybe the rumors are right and Cassandra didn't die of natural causes, I said. In that case, they would want to talk to us all. How are they going to talk to all of us? I think there's something like 100 people in attendance, Presley said. Well, there seems to be a lot of police in the back of the room, I said, and we all turned to look. Police were stationed at the 3 exits, one on either side of the double doors. I could already see that people were lining up, and as they were leaving, they paused to speak to the police, but it didn't seem to be taking too long. I guess we should join them. We got up and joined the line. The police were very efficient, and the line went quickly. When it was my turn to walk to the door, the officer asked my name and found it on the list, checking it off. Then he asked me where I was from, what brought me to the conference, and if I'd known Cassandra before the conference. Once I answered those questions, I was on my way. I walked a few feet down the hall, out of the throngs of people, and waited for Presley and Tillie. That was a letdown, Presley said, and I looked at her in confusion. I was at least hoping for some indication of what happened to Cassandra, and when I asked, he just said he wasn't at liberty to say. You asked him that? You've got guts, Tillie said, and Presley shrugged. Hey, what's the worst that could happen? Exactly what did happen. He said nothing. But there is no way that Cassandra died of natural causes, or all these police wouldn't be here, Presley said. I agree with that. But what actually happened then, I asked. Chapter 5. It was a fun-packed morning after Susan Adams' opening keynote, as fun as it could be considering the circumstances. While Susan was engaging and full of great information, I could tell there was a tempered feeling in the air, as if no one wanted to act like they were enjoying themselves. Maybe I was projecting, because I sure felt a twinge of guilt when I found myself forgetting for a moment that someone had just died. Regardless of what had happened, the speakers were knowledgeable and enlightening. My head was full of new information. There had been 2 different tracks of sessions to attend, one for beginner business owners and one for the more advanced amongst us. With as much as I had learned in the beginners classes, I couldn't imagine what the advanced classes must be like. I could only hope that one day my business acumen would reach that level. Presley, Tillie, and I had gone our separate ways attending different sessions after the keynote speaker, and I was in my last session before lunch, aptly titled Social Media Marketing for Dummies. My son Cody, who was 9, knew more than me about social media, and even in this very basic course, I had pages and pages of notes. Truth be told, I was completely overwhelmed. Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Snapchat, each one seemed to have its own nuances and own demographic. Figuring out how to target our social media efforts at Read Wine was going to be a full-time job. However, I knew it was also a necessary one. That much I did know about business. Marketing was key. I was sitting at a round table with several other women. We had been given the task of spending 10 minutes talking amongst ourselves, getting to know each other, and sharing one way we use social media to grow our business. It sounded like a great icebreaker in theory, but it seemed like the women were more interested in talking about Cassandra because the conversation quickly went there. "What do you guys think happened?" asked one of the women at the table who had introduced herself as Helena. "I heard she had an underlying heart condition," another woman said. "Maybe someone finally gave her what she deserved," a third woman said bitingly, and the others opening gawked at the seemingly bitter words coming out of her mouth. "You can't believe everything you hear," a brunette snapped. "People are going to talk and try to make it seem like there was a really juicy story when it probably was just some kind of random health issue. I heard that her business was on the rocks and she had been taking on new clients and not fulfilling their matches, that people were asking for the refunds her contract guaranteed, but she wasn't giving them out because she couldn't afford to," Helena said in a conspiratorial whisper. "I heard that too," another woman said. "I sat there feeling a bit weird to hear these women gossip about Cassandra while also trying to wrap my brain around everything they were sharing." "Oh, don't worry, honey. I know it might seem like we're talking crazy, but we're all from Chicago and traveled in a lot of the same networking circles Cassandra did," Helena said, patting my hand. She must have noted the look of discomfort on my face. "Oh, I'm from Michigan and didn't know her personally, just from her videos," I said, feeling lame. Helena nodded with a knowing smile. "See? You saw the positive, sweet, motivating side of Cassandra. We know a different side." "Not to take anything away from her," one of the other ladies said. "She was a wonderful motivational speaker, but that wasn't who she was in real life. She was a great faker, though. She missed her calling as an actress, in my opinion. I'm Sharon Taylor, by the way. Helena Baxter, Patsy Smith, and Connie Richards," she said, pointing at the other ladies as she rattled off their names. "Trixie Pristine." "Nice to meet you, Trixie," the women chorused. "Are you all friends?" I asked Sharon, since it seemed that they all knew each other. "It depends on your definition of friend," Sharon cackled. "Oh, stop," Patsy scolded. "Don't tease the poor girl. She'll think we're all crazy. To answer your question, yes, we all met years ago in a networking group that Cassandra was also a part of. We knew Cassandra before she was, well, Cassandra." "Oh, so you knew her well then?" I asked. "As well as anyone could know her." Helena shrugged. "What do you mean by that?" I questioned. "She was very secretive and private. Not as open as you might think if you just watched her videos," Sharon said. "She was also determined to win at all costs," Helena said, none too kindly. "What do you mean by that?" I asked again, as if these were the only words in my vocabulary. "Now, Helena, we shouldn't speak ill of the dead," Patsy chided. The timer bell went off, signaling that networking time was over. The other women immediately got up and filed out of the room, leaving me to sit there wondering what kind of person Cassandra really was and if one of these women had wanted her dead. Chapter 6. You wouldn't believe what these women were saying about Cassandra. She wasn't liked by everyone. "That's for sure," I told Presley and Tillie 30 minutes later as we sat down to lunch. "Like what?" Presley asked as she speared a fork full of lettuce. "That she wasn't nice in real life. She was a fake person. She wasn't fulfilling her clients' contracts, and one of the women even mentioned she had some big financial issues." "Well, isn't that true for a lot of people?" Tillie asked. "I mean, I know the perfect life stuff people post on social media is often to hide how imperfect their life really is." "True," I agreed, taking a bite of my chicken. Chewing while I thought, it took a minute before I continued. "I got the sense that none of those ladies would be surprised if she were murdered." "So, do you think the rumors were true?" Tillie said. "It has to be on the news by now, whether it was a murder or not, don't you think?" I asked. "You would think so," Presley said. "Let's look." I pulled out my phone and went to the browser, typing in Cassandra Collins' death. Presley and Tillie, who were on either side of me, leaned in so they could see what came up. It didn't take long for the search engine to pull up articles about Cassandra Collins, and the third one was headlined, Cassandra Collins Foul Play? Click on it, Presley said, waving her finger in front of my screen. I did just that and opened the article. Tillie and Presley moved closer so we could all read the article, which said, Cassandra Collins of Barrington, Illinois, was pronounced dead at Midview Community Hospital last night. The police suspect foul play, and the death is currently under investigation. I slumped back in my chair. That wasn't a lot of information. I would have expected more. The article is from a small-town paper, and if there is an investigation, then maybe that's all they know, Presley said pragmatically. How can we find out more? Maybe we should try to talk to that front desk clerk again. Teresa, I think her name was, Tillie said. That's a good idea, Presley said, if she's willing to talk to us. She seemed really nervous last night. She probably doesn't want to lose her job talking out of turn, Tillie said. I agreed with Tillie and hated to put Teresa in that position, but how else could we find out, I wondered. I snapped my fingers. Maybe Cassandra's assistant is here. She would know. I didn't even know she had an assistant, Presley said, spearing a fork full of salad on her plate. How do you know she has an assistant? I've watched all of her videos about 5 million times, and she's mentioned her assistant Roxy as the person she couldn't live without. So if this Roxy was indeed her right hand, then it would stand to reason she would know what happened to Cassandra, I said, my body tingling a little with nervousness. Knowing the police suspected foul play and actually trying to investigate a murder were two different things. Then I'm game. How do we find Roxy? Presley asked. Maybe we could go to the registration desk and ask for her room number? Tillie asked. I shook my head. I don't think they give out that kind of information. Tillie's face fell. You do have an idea there, though. We could have them call up to her room and ask her if she would be willing to chat with us. We still have 20 or so minutes before the afternoon session starts. Should we go ask? I rose from the table, looking at the other two ladies, who nodded quickly. We rode the elevator down to the main floor where the registration desk was located, and luckily, there wasn't a line, so we were able to walk right up. Can I help you? A young man whose name tag read Philip asked, and I felt a small pang of disappointment that it wasn't Teresa working. It would have been nice to at least try to ask her a few questions since she had been willing to talk about Cassandra before. Hi, Philip. I was hoping you could ring the room for Roxy Michaels. I'd like to leave her a message. She's traveling with Cassandra Collins and is part of her block of rooms, I said, and flashed my best smile. Philip typed a few keys on the keyboard and then frowned up at me. You mean Roxy Andrews? I laughed. Yes, Andrews. Silly me. Michaels was her maiden name. Sorry about that. Can you ring her room? I couldn't believe how easily the lies rolled off my tongue, and I felt a little guilty for deceiving this guy. Of course, he said, picking up the handset of his phone. He punched in a few numbers and handed me the receiver. It rang a few times, and the voicemail came on. I hung up and returned the handset to Philip. I guess she's out. Maybe we'll run into her later. Thank you. Well, that was a bust, Presley said as we walked away. Not exactly. I was leaning over enough and I could see that he typed in room number 429, which means she's on my floor, I said. Genius, Tillie said, and I felt myself blush. I don't know about genius, but I'm glad I was able to see the numbers. As much as I want to talk to Roxy, I'm still determined to get the most out of this conference, and it's time for the afternoon sessions start. So how about we all head to room 429 afterwards to see if Roxy is in? What if she won't talk to us? Presley asked. I shrugged. Well, we can at least try. What can it hurt? Chapter 7. I pulled the key card out of my purse and slid it in the slot on my front door, having headed back to my room after the early afternoon session. Even though I was anxious to find out more about Cassandra, I needed to call and check on Red Wine. The other ladies and I were going to meet up in a bit. The door mechanism clicked and the green light blinked on, signaling the door was unlocked. I put my hand on the handle to push it open when I heard a noise to my left at the end of the hall. I turned my head and saw someone was coming out of their room walking in my direction. It was a young woman, early 20s, with brown hair cut in a cute pixie, and she looked vaguely familiar. I smiled as I tried to place her, and the woman smiled back. As I turned back to my door and started to walk into my room, I realized the woman was coming out of the room at the very end. She had to be Roxy, Cassandra's assistant. That's why she looked familiar. I had seen her on one of Cassandra's videos. I just hadn't realized who she was at the time. Cassandra hadn't introduced her on camera. Maybe this was my opportunity to talk to her. I hated to let this chance pass without at least trying. As Roxy made her way closer to me, presumably heading to the elevator, I called out, "Excuse me." The girl stopped, eyebrows raised questioningly and a pleasant smile on her face. "Can I help you with something?" she asked. "Are you Roxy? Cassandra Collins' assistant?" The girl nodded. "I'm so sorry about what happened. I can't believe she's dead," I continued, shaking my head. "Thank you. It's all been quite a shock." The girl went to take another step in the direction of the elevator, and I called out again. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" "About what?" the girl said, eyeing me as the smile she had been wearing slipped a little. I couldn't blame her for being cautious. Her boss had just collapsed on stage, and the police were investigating it as a murder. No doubt I wasn't the first person to pump her for gruesome details. I felt bad, essentially doing the same thing. "I'm sorry. I'm sure you've had people bugging you nonstop. I hate to even ask. Do you know what happened to Cassandra?" Roxy sighed, as if she had indeed had this question asked 1,000 times already. "I have no idea," she said, her voice flat. To me, her response didn't quite seem to ring true. By the way her body seemed to stiffen at the question, it gave me the impression Roxy wasn't being entirely truthful. But why? "I heard some people gossiping earlier that she had made some enemies in her industry," I said tentatively, not wanting to make it look like I was spreading rumors about Cassandra. Roxy started laughing. "That's an understatement. She was hard to work for and wanted to be the biggest matchmaking service in the Midwest. She didn't seem to care what it took to get there. I can understand wanting to be the best." "Do you mean it was the way she went about it?" I said, fishing for more details and finding it odd that someone whom Cassandra had publicly proclaimed to be her right hand would say such negative things about her to a stranger. Though Roxy's words definitely aligned with what the other ladies had said. "I shouldn't be talking about her like this. She's dead. Gossip won't serve anyone at this point. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go." Roxy cast her eyes down and grimaced a little. Maybe she thought she had said too much to me, a perfect stranger. "Wait." I put my hand on Roxy's arm to stop her. "Do you think she was murdered?" I read that the police were investigating it as such. "Why do you care? Did you even know Cassandra?" Roxy said as her eyes narrowed, more of the friendliness leaving. "Not personally, but—" "Then it's really none of your business, is it?" Roxy cut me off. "Now, if you'll excuse me." Roxy didn't wait for me to respond. She just took off at a quick pace toward the elevators. As I went into my room, I couldn't help but wonder what Roxy was hiding. Did she not want to talk ill about Cassandra, or was she just under instructions from the police not to talk? I had almost an hour before I needed to head back downstairs to meet Presley and Tillie. I called to check on Read Wine and was once again reminded that a business owner's life is never dull. Somehow, the bakery we sourced our baked goods from had sent us the wrong scones. Fruit Loop instead of blueberry. When I cried out, shocked, "Gross! Who would want a Fruit Loop scone?" Sally told me the batch had been meant for the Girl Scout troop, which made more sense, but still I thought that a very odd flavor. Once that was out of the way, I went over to where my computer bag was sitting and pulled out my laptop. Because I'd only followed Cassandra for her motivational stuff, not her actual online dating services, I didn't know who Cassandra's competitors would be. It seemed like pretty easy information to find out on the internet, and the most logical first choice of who might want her dead. Especially if she was as ruthless as other people were saying. 30 minutes later, I was waiting in the hotel coffee shop to meet Presley and Tillie. It seemed we were all caffeine addicts. I was so excited to tell them what I found out that I had arrived 15 minutes early, ordered a latte, and had already sucked half of it down before I saw Presley walk through the door with Tillie close behind. "I got down here early, so I didn't order you guys coffee. I didn't want it to get cold." "No problem, Tillie. What can I get you?" Presley said. "Soy chai latte, please," she said and fumbled in her purse, pulling out some cash to hand to Presley. "Coming right up," Presley said as she waved Tillie's money away and walked up to the counter to place the order. I was fidgeting with excitement, or maybe it was the caffeine I'd gulped, but either way, I couldn't wait to share my news. Waiting until Presley got back with the lattes was torture. "Here you go." One soy chai, Presley said a few minutes later, handing Tillie her drink. We sat at a table in the corner of the coffee shop. It was fairly busy since it was free time for the conference attendees, and all the tables were taken up by small groups of women chatting, just as we were. I couldn't help but wonder what they were chatting about. Business or Cassandra's murder? I ran into Roxy, I said, pausing to wait for their reaction. No way! You talked to her? Presley exclaimed, and I nodded. I sure did. She didn't really want to talk at first, but did say that Cassandra wasn't the easiest to work for and was pretty ruthless when she wanted something. I also asked her if it was true Cassandra was murdered, and she claimed to not know, but she was holding back. I'm sure of it. At least that's what her body language suggested. It got me thinking of who might want her dead. The one negative thing everyone has said about her is the same. She was ruthless in business and wanted to win at all costs. I then looked up other matchmaking and online dating services in Chicago, thinking maybe one of her competitors wanted her out of the way, and came up with a list of 7 companies, 2 of which are no longer in business. Why do you think it might be her competition? Tillie asked. No reason other than that. Between what Roxy and the ladies who knew her from Chicago said, it seems the most logical place to start. But I'm totally open to any other ideas. Oh no, I agree with you. I just wondered, that's all. I took the piece of paper on which I'd written down the names and phone numbers for the companies and put it on the table. None of these look familiar, Presley said, but then I've never used any kind of dating service in Chicago. Or at all for that matter. I've been involved with the same man for years, so I've never needed one. We should call them and ask if they knew Cassandra. See what kind of reaction we get. Maybe that would tell us something. Don't you think that's a little, bold? Tillie asked. Yes. But how else are we going to get any information? Presley shrugged her shoulders. I was thinking the same thing, I said. And what's the harm? It might seem a little pushy, but how else can we find out who Cassandra's enemies might be? I don't want to give up. I feel too invested in this already. Presley chuckled. I'm game, Tillie said. Whatever you guys think. I'll admit, I want to find out who did this to her. Then let's just divide the list. Each of us can call a couple of people. It shouldn't take long, I said, making notes for each of them so they knew whom to call. What about these 2 that you say are out of business? Blissful Life and Made for Marriage, Tillie said. We can try calling them. Maybe the number gets forwarded somewhere, I said. Might as well be thorough. We walked out of the coffee shop into the lobby, where it was less noisy and we wouldn't be as easily overheard. I went to one corner while Presley and Tillie found other areas in the lobby to sit that weren't right next to someone. I pulled out my phone, sat the paper with the numbers on my lap, and proceeded to dial the first number. We had discussed it and agreed the best course of action was asking for the owner and just being forthright that we were calling to find out about their relationship with Cassandra Collins. As I dialed the first number, I crossed my fingers and hoped the time spent would be worth it. Chapter 8. I struck out on my first call. I made it past the receptionist to the owner, who was very pleasant but refused to comment on Cassandra Collins one way or another, saying it would be unprofessional of her. The woman wasn't wrong, but I had hoped under the circumstances that small fact wouldn't be a big obstacle. The other 2 numbers I had were the ones for now-defunct companies, Blissful Life and Made for Marriage. I dialed the number for Blissful Life and got a recorded message that the number had been disconnected. Rats, I thought. I took in a deep breath and let it out, crossing my fingers that the 3rd time was the charm, or that maybe Presley and Tillie were having better luck. I dialed the number for Made for Marriage, expecting the same result as before. To my surprise, it rang twice, and a woman answered. Hello, thank you for calling Maids for Cleaning. A cheery female voice came across the line. Oh, I'm sorry, I must have the wrong number. Let me guess. You're trying to get hold of Made for Marriage, the woman said matter-of-factly, a little of the perkiness gone from her voice but still friendly. Yeah, actually, I am, I said, somewhat apologetically. Well, I hate to tell you that if you're looking for love or just marriage, I'm no longer in that business, but I have some people I can refer you to. Would one of those be Cassandra Collins' business of love? The woman snorted. Hardly. I wouldn't refer my worst enemy to that woman. I perked up at this and sat up straighter. It sounded like there was something between this woman and Cassandra, and from the woman's tone, it didn't sound like it was something positive. Oh, I take it you weren't friends with Cassandra Collins then, I said casually, not wanting to come across like I wanted the information too badly. Furthest thing from it, even before she drove me out of business, I wasn't a fan of hers. Why not? I asked, thinking maybe I was finally onto something. Let's just say her business practices leave a lot to be desired and she wasn't above stealing clients. Is that what she did to you? Stole your clients? Among other things. Did you know she's dead? By the loud gasp I heard the woman take on the other end of the line, I gathered she had not heard. So either the news hadn't made it all the way to Chicago, or the woman didn't watch the news. Oh no, what happened? It's not known for sure, but the police are investigating and it looks like murder. Is that why you called me? To see if I killed her? The woman's tone completely changed. Now she was suspicious. No, I'm just trying to get a little more information about who Cassandra Collins was. Who did you say you were again? The woman asked, all friendliness gone at this point. I got the sense that the woman felt I had tried to pull one over on her, tried to trick her somehow into talking to me. In all fairness, she had started chatting with little prompting from me. Do you know of anyone who would have wanted her dead? I pressed on. Oh no, you don't. You underlings of Cassandra's think that rules don't apply to you and you can take anyone down. One of you probably killed her, as horrible as she was to work for. And with that, the woman hung up. I sat there for a few seconds with my phone in my hand, staring at the black screen, when Presley and Tillie walked up. Well, that was a wasted effort, Presley said. What's with that expression on your face? Did you find something out? I struck out on the first two, and a woman picked up on the third, Made for Marriage. One of the companies that is no longer open rang through to a company called Maids for Cleaning. It must be her new business. The woman had nothing good to say about Cassandra, and once she realized I hadn't called looking for a matchmaker, she accused me of being one of Cassandra's sneaky underlings and hung up on me. But not before accusing me of killing Cassandra myself. Well, not me specifically, but rather one of Cassandra's underlings. She thought Cassandra was that bad to work for. Presley gave out a low whistle. Wonder what that was all about. It doesn't seem like many people liked Cassandra. Definitely not this woman, I said. What if we talked to Roxy again or anyone else who was here with Cassandra? Tillie asked. Was anyone else here with her? I asked. I got here early and was relaxing in the lobby. People watching, drinking my chai latte when she arrived. She was with 4 people. One was Ashley, who was probably getting her settled. Then another woman who, by your description of Roxy, had to have been her. Then there was a woman her own age who looked a lot like her, so I was thinking maybe a sister or something, and then a man who also looked to be about her age. Yep, you think they're still here in the hotel now that she's dead? I wondered out loud. The police did say no one could leave, so they should still be here, Tillie said. If only we could figure out how to find them, Presley said. It might not be that hard, Tillie said, and pointed across the room where 2 people were sitting in the bar, a woman with a glass of wine in front of her and a man with beer in front of him. That's them, Tillie said. Drinking at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I said. If I had an alcoholic beverage at 3 p.m., I'd be asleep in no time. Well, they are part of Cassandra Collins' entourage. Maybe they're depressed, their friends just died, Presley said. Should we go talk to them? Tillie asked. At the very least, we can offer our condolences. Come on, I said. We walked to the bar and took a seat at a table close to where the couple was sitting, but not directly next to them as it was early, and the bar only had a few patrons, so it might look odd if we sat close to them. Should we order something? Tillie said. You know, so it makes more sense we are here. Hey, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Isn't that what they say? Presley said and waved the waitress over. I'll have a glass of Moscato, please, I said, figuring I would order, but not drink more than a sip or two, because it really would put me to sleep. The waitress then looked at Tillie and Presley. Same, Presley said. Me too, please, Tillie said. We sat there in silence, each lost in our own thoughts, and in a few minutes our drinks were placed in front of us. So at what point do we go offer our condolences? Presley asked after she took a tiny sip of her wine. I guess there's no time like the present, I said. We slid off our stools to walk over to the table where the couple was sitting. As we approached, the couple looked at us curiously, but not in a way that said, "Leave us alone. I volunteered to be the spokesperson. We saw you come in with Cassandra Collins yesterday and wanted to come give our condolences. We're very sorry for your loss." "Thank you very much," the man said with a closed-mouth smile. The woman sniffed and pulled out a tissue, dabbing her eyes. That means a lot. Cassandra touched many lives. Did you know her? Not personally. We are all here for the conference, I responded honestly. How nice. She loved that so many women were here. How do you both know her, if I may ask? I continued. I'm Cassandra's ex-husband, Robert, and this is her sister, Anne, Robert said. As I stared at them with barely veiled surprise, Robert started laughing. We often get that response. Cassandra and I were on very good terms. I'm her business manager, and we had things to discuss, so I thought I'd tag along and enjoy some golf, and also try and get some business done. Cassandra hates traveling alone, so Anne often tags along. It's true. We've always been close. Well, we don't want to intrude. We just wanted to say we're sorry for your loss, I said in a rush, and turned to head back to the table, almost dragging Tillie and Presley behind me. Once we were seated, Presley said, I thought you were going to ask more questions. Remember the people I told you I heard arguing through my bedroom wall? I asked in a loud whisper, and both women nodded. That's them. If I hadn't recognized their voices, I would have known by the names. How many Roberts and Anns can there be together here? Did you say you heard them talking about doing something to Cassandra? Presley asked, and I nodded vehemently. What if they're the ones who killed her? Tillie exclaimed. Doesn't it seem odd that her ex-husband and her sister would be in a hotel room together at night? To me, that screams motive even more. Presley shrugged. I know a lot of families who have a weird dynamic. I wish we could talk to Roxy again and get her take on those two, I said. Why can't we? Said Presley. I guess you're right. The worst she can do is not answer. Let's go to her room and see if she's there. Chapter 9. I finished filling in Presley and Tillie when I realized it was getting late. Oh crap, look at the time, I said, noting that we only had 10 minutes before the late afternoon session started. We can't stop now. We've just found out some good information, Presley protested. I know, but I don't want to miss any of the sessions. I need this information to grow my business. We can't forget why we're here, I said practically. We all paid a lot of money for this conference. Tillie sighed. You're right, but this was just getting interesting. Guys, Robert and Anne aren't going anywhere. The fact that they are still here means that, like us, they can't leave either. So attending what we came here to attend isn't going to make much of a difference, I pointed out. She's right. Let's head up to the third floor, go to the session, and then resume our detective work before dinner, Presley said. We paid for our drinks and left the mostly untouched wine on the table as we headed out and joined the throngs of women heading up the escalators to where all of the rooms hosting the breakout sessions were located. This time we were all headed to see the same speaker who was presenting a how-to on optimizing your website. Because we hadn't arrived early enough, we weren't able to get a table in the front, which of course was what I would have preferred, but that was what I got for taking my focus off the real reason I was here. I mentally chastised myself for getting so involved in trying to solve the murder of someone I didn't even know, rather than focusing on how to improve my business. I felt guilty, so I tried to renew my focus on the speaker, who just started his PowerPoint presentation. I opened my notebook and had my pen ready to take notes. However, I couldn't keep my mind from wandering, partly because I couldn't understand a word the man on stage was saying. Keywords, searchability. It was a foreign language to me. Cora was the one who maintained our website and who understood such things. I just hoped the notes I was taking would make sense to Cora because not only did I not understand, but I wasn't focused. I was too busy thinking about Robert and Anne. I really didn't need the distraction and tried to shake it off to no avail. If Robert and Anne were sharing a room and arguing the way they were, then it made sense they were involved. If not romantically, and I thought that seemed a bit creepy, then at least on a friendly level. Friendly enough to argue the way I heard them argue. I couldn't help but wonder what Robert and Anne might stand to gain from her death, if anything. The argument I overheard sounded like they had something against Cassandra. That thought kept turning over and over in my mind as I struggled to listen to the speaker. I was grateful when he was finally finished, and I closed my notebook with a loud slap and put it back in my purse. Did either of you understand any of that? I asked Presley and Tillie as we all got up to go. A little. Only because my friend Jared, who helps me with my website, has been trying to teach me some things or I would have been totally lost, Presley said. I didn't understand one single bit. If I felt dumb when I got here, I feel even dumber now. Am I nuts thinking I can run my own business? All this conference has done is make me realize how much I don't know. Tillie sighed, and I put my arm around her, giving her a quick squeeze. Trust me, "You will do fine. I didn't know a thing about running a business before I started Read Wine. Neither did my business partners, and we're doing well in spite of ourselves." "Me too. Plus, pampering your pet is all the rage these days." "You've got a great business model," Presley said. "I spend a ton of money on Bella for things like toys and treats. I'd spend even more if I could find an outfit that would actually fit her gigantic frame." Tillie smiled. "Thanks, guys, for making me feel better." "We have an hour before dinner. Should we go over our notes from this session?" I asked, and Presley quickly interrupted. "Heck, no. I would go to sleep if I had to listen to any more computer talk. I say we try to find out more about those Robert and Ann characters." "I agree with her," Tillie said. "I did too. Even if there wasn't a murder to investigate, I didn't want to go back over my session notes. Not right now, at least. There would be enough time to try to explain my chicken scratch to Cora when I got back to Romero." As we walked down the hall, I spotted Ashley, the event coordinator, and nodded in her direction. "Maybe she knows something," I said. "Kinda looks like someone beat us to it," Tillie said. We all watched as Susan Adams stopped Ashley. The two women appeared to be arguing. "Let's see if we can get a little bit closer," Presley said, and we inched our way until we were within earshot, but still far enough away to not really bring attention to ourselves. That part wasn't very difficult, because all throughout the hallway there were small groups of women talking. "You promised me top billing if I did this for you, and so far, I don't see my name on any more of the sessions in the remaining schedule," Susan said to Ashley with her hands on her hips and a scowl on her face. "Susan, I gave you the keynote and the 2 sessions you asked for. I don't know what more you want," Ashley said in a pleading tone. "What I want is for you to live up to your end of the bargain," Susan hissed, leaning in toward Ashley. "I can't just take away other people's time slots and give them to you with no explanation." "Of course you can. Cassandra's dead. No one can question if you have to shake things up a bit, and if someone does, well, you're a smart girl. You can figure out what to say. You don't think that it might look a little suspicious if Cassandra dies and then all of a sudden you're taking over all of her sessions? That's for me to worry about, and besides, who really cares what other people think? Your job is to get me scheduled into those sessions, and I don't care how you do it. Now, unless you want me to go to the police with what I know about you, which we both know would bump you up the suspect list, I suggest you take out whomever you put into the remainder of Cassandra's sessions and give them to me," Susan said, as she took a step into Ashley, who shrank back a little. It was evident that Ashley was afraid of Susan because of what appeared to be some sort of secret, what I wouldn't give to know what that was. "Fine," Ashley said, in a resigned tone. "Then our business is done, and you can do me the favor of leaving me alone." With that, Ashley whirled around and headed back down the hall, quickly disappearing behind another group of women. We all looked at each other, confused. "Did you all hear the same thing I just heard?" I asked. "If you mean Susan Adams threatening the event coordinator, then yes, you heard the same thing I heard. That was pretty fearless of Susan to threaten her after Cassandra's been murdered," Presley said. "If Susan would threaten Ashley with whatever secret she knows, maybe she killed Cassandra. She sure seemed adamant she should get Cassandra's spots in the conference. And she didn't seem to care too much that her behavior might make her look like a suspect," I said. "It seems odd she wouldn't care if she brought the wrong kind of attention to herself." We continued down the hall and found Ashley standing by the main schedule board. She had a black Sharpie in her hand and was furiously slashing out names and writing something else in. "You think she's adding Susan's name with a marker?" Presley whispered to the others. "It sure looks that way. She must really be mad to not just go back and print a new schedule," Presley said. When Ashley finished doing whatever she was doing on the schedule and had walked away, the 3 of us scurried over, and sure enough, Susan's name was now in a few additional spots. So Ashley gave her 4 more sessions over the next 2 days, on top of the ones she already had. "I bet that's going to tick off the 4 women who've just lost their spots," I said, pulling out my phone and taking a picture of the schedule. "I wonder what Ashley is going to tell them. And I wonder what Susan has over Ashley that Ashley doesn't want found out," I mused. "I know how we might be able to find out," Presley said. Tillie and I looked at her, eyebrows raised. "One of my good friends is a detective in Chicago. He can look her up. Maybe she has a record or something. Want me to call him?" Chapter 10. Presley fished her phone out of her purse and resumed talking. "He might come up with Zip, but at least we can try and figure out what Ashley might be hiding." "That'd be awesome," I exclaimed. "Do either of you remember her last name?" Presley asked us. "I'm not sure," I stammered, and we all looked at each other, confusion on our faces. Wait a minute, I'm sure I have it written down in my notes. Just let me look, Tillie said, walking over to the table and setting her large tote bag on it. She rifled through it for a minute, finally pulling out her notebook. She started flipping through the pages. Just a minute. I'm sorry. I write everything down because if not, I tend to forget, she apologized. Don't worry about it. We can wait, I said, glad someone had the information. Here it is. Ashley Houston. Tillie grinned triumphantly. Presley flashed her the thumbs up and dialed the number, and in a few seconds she was talking to someone on the other end. You have a minute? Presley said into the phone. He must have said yes because she turned and motioned for us to follow her. She walked over to a sitting area no one was using and took a seat. So I'm at this all-women business conference at the Dusty Dunes Conference Center and Resort in northern Indiana. The police are investigating the murder of the keynote speaker, Cassandra Collins. Presley paused as she listened intently. How did you know? Oh, well, yeah, I guess that makes sense. That's interesting. No, they haven't said much to us here. But the main reason I called is to see if you could do a quick little search for me on someone named Ashley Houston. She's the event coordinator here. Okay, she said, and put her hand over the receiver. What did he say? I asked excitedly before Presley could speak. He had someone walk up to his desk, but he said he would look her up in a minute. But Cassandra has been all over the news back in Chicago, which I guess isn't surprising since she was a little bit of a local celebrity. I found it odd that the woman at Maid for Cleaning hadn't heard then. Maybe she wasn't one to check the news. I wonder, I started saying, and Presley held her finger up to her lips to shush me. Yes, that's right, Ashley Houston. I don't know. I assume it's spelled like the city in Texas, Presley said and looked at Tillie with her eyebrows raised questioningly. Tillie consulted her notebook and nodded. Yes, as in the city in Texas, Presley confirmed. Well, thanks anyway. I'll be back in a few days and we'll grab a drink. What did he say about Ashley? I asked impatiently the minute Presley hung up the phone. She's clean, meaning she doesn't have a record. Oh, I said, dejected, then felt bad for wishing Ashley was a criminal. It just would have been nice to have a clear suspect or even a direction to take our investigation. But he did have some interesting information about Cassandra, Presley said mysteriously. Do tell, Tillie and I said in unison. He said Cassandra had someone stalking her last year, Presley said. Like who? An old boyfriend or something? I asked. No, a woman named Deborah Harris. Never heard that name before, but then again, why would I have? Presley said. Do the police think this woman had something to do with Cassandra's murder? I asked. He didn't know, but he said he would do some asking around and see if he could find anything out. Chapter 11. I headed to the ballroom where the evening gala was being held and where I was meeting Presley and Tillie. I also scanned the room looking for Susan Adams. I wanted to ask her about her relationship with Ashley. I wasn't exactly sure how I would bring up that I'd heard Susan threaten Ashley. I knew I needed to be subtle, but I thought if I got Susan alone, I could casually try and work it in conversation. Especially since Susan seemed to be holding it over Ashley's head, although I was unsure why. What did Susan have to gain? Did Susan want to be the keynote speaker that badly? I grabbed a glass of wine from the waiter who was circling the room, and I had to say I was quite impressed at how beautiful the room looked with twinkling lights everywhere. The round tables had ivory linens and colorful flower centerpieces that turned the room from functional to magical. I saw Presley and Tillie walk in the door and raised my hand to flag them down. They too grabbed a drink from a waiter as they crossed the room to get to me. You both look gorgeous, I said to Presley and Tillie. Presley was dressed in a silver sheath dress with very simple silver earrings and bright red shoes, while Tillie was a little more conservative in a turquoise dress that had a sweetheart neckline and a full skirt. Her dress color really made her eyes pop. So do you. I almost wore my black dress because you can't go wrong with the little black dress. I bought this dress a while ago and haven't had a chance to wear it. Too fancy for most the things I go to, so I was excited to wear here, Presley said. You both make me look frumpy, Tillie said, and Presley and I disagreed with her. She looked beautiful. We mingled, talking to other women we had met throughout the sessions, and I was surprised that for a while I forgot all about Cassandra. I was enjoying talking about business and networking. However, it was short-lived. Liar. Don't stand there and try to act like you liked her. No one liked her. A voice screamed out, and everyone's head, including mine, swiveled in the direction of the sound. Rhonda was screaming at Susan. We weren't friends, but that doesn't mean I hated her, Susan snapped back, but in a hushed tone, glancing around. I had a feeling she didn't want to bring attention to the argument they were having, but it was a little too late for that because everyone was staring. Whatever, Susan. She was getting ready to take your business out from under you just like she did ours. The two women looked so heated, I almost wondered if their argument might get physical, when all of a sudden Ashley came out of nowhere and grabbed both women, all but dragging them out of the room. As I watched them all leave, I couldn't help but think, first Ashley and now Rhonda. What was it about Susan Adams that made everyone angry with her? I was back in my room after the evening gala, the rest of which had been uneventful and a lot of fun once things settled down from the shenanigans between Susan and Rhonda. I kicked off my shoes before heading to the desk for a bottle of water, only to find housekeeping hadn't replaced the one I'd taken earlier. I didn't dislike tap water, but I did prefer bottled when I wasn't drinking out of my own faucet at home. There was something about filling up from the hotel bathroom faucet that turned my stomach, fair or not. I put my shoes back on and headed to the elevator to go downstairs to the 24-hour store in the lobby so I could get some water and maybe a snack. I got off the elevator and started walking across the foyer when I noticed Rhonda and Michelle sitting at the bar. As much as I wanted to get my water and go back to my room and relax, I also wanted to find out what had pushed Rhonda to the point she'd reached earlier that night with Susan. Taking a detour, I headed over to their table. "Hi, ladies." "Hi," they chorused back, both smiling. "It's Trixie, right?" Rhonda said. "Good memory, Rhonda." "You too, apparently." Rhonda laughed. "Join us?" Michelle offered, motioning to the empty seat. "I'd love to." I sat down and the waiter came over and took my order. "I'm sure you witnessed my embarrassing outburst at dinner," Rhonda said, coming right out with her dirty laundry, so to speak, leading me to believe she might be more willing to talk than I thought since she had just brought it up. "That's okay. You said what needed to be said." Michelle soothed her friend by rubbing her shoulder. I couldn't help but think that was what Sally or Cora would say to me if I was in the same situation, and felt happy that Rhonda had such a good friend. "What was all that about?" I asked gently. "If you don't mind me asking, you seemed really angry at Susan." "Michelle and I have a matchmaking service as well, or rather used to have one called Blissful Life. It was a small boutique business that focused on one-on-one placements and a high level of customer service. We stupidly made the mistake of selling our business to Cassandra. She made an offer we didn't think we could refuse. We were broke, having made some bad financial decisions, but we regretted it the minute we did it. We should have tried harder to figure a way out of the mess we were in. This was about 6 months ago. A few weeks ago, we started having clients contact us, extremely unhappy with the service they were getting from Business of Love and the fact that Cassandra had raised the rates. Something she promised us she wouldn't do with our existing clients. 3 of them asked if we could take them back. Michelle and I came here to try to talk to Cassandra and figure out a way to get our company back since it seemed she didn't care about our clients. "Did you get a chance to talk to her?" I asked, happy that I now knew who owned the one defunct company I hadn't been able to get hold of, but sad for Rhonda and Michelle to have lost their business. "Yeah, but it was a total waste," Rhonda said with a grimace and took a sip of wine. "She told us our clients were too needy and she'd sold their contracts to Susan," Michelle said softly. No wonder Rhonda was mad. I also couldn't help but feel bad for the clients that were being shuffled around. I was surprised Cassandra would treat clients like that if she was trying to make her matchmaking service the best. That wasn't good customer service. "Could you at least get your clients back? The disgruntled ones?" "What did your agreement say?" I asked, wondering whether I could help. "We had a non-compete that said we couldn't open another matchmaking service for 2 years. That's why we were hoping to talk to Cassandra and see if she might let us out of the non-compete so we could start up our business again. Like you, we thought Cassandra might see reason and at least release the unhappy clients back to us, since she wouldn't want people to talk negatively about her business. Even though we would never stoop to that level ourselves, we thought maybe suggesting it might do the trick. We assume that agreement probably still holds, even with the sale of our business to Susan, though I did send our lawyer an email just to ask," Rhonda said. "And what did she say to that?" "When we found out Cassandra had sold that book of business to Susan, we asked Susan about selling it back to us, and she laughed in our faces," Rhonda said. "She wasn't even willing to discuss it. She said she couldn't achieve her goal of becoming the biggest matchmaking service in Chicago if she gave up any clients. Not to be morbid, but since Cassandra is dead, do you think that means her clients would be let out of her contract and Susan might take them over?" I asked, even if it seemed cold and callous, not to mention alluding to the fact that I thought Susan might be the killer. Rhonda shook her head, but didn't say anything. Michelle spoke up. Who knows? Now, can you see why I lost it on Susan and why we're sitting at the bar drinking? Rhonda asked with a half-hearted smile. I sat and talked to Rhonda and Michelle for another 45 minutes. We had moved on from Rhonda's altercation with Susan to talking about Cassandra and then to being women business owners in general. I found myself wide awake with excitement and ideas by the time Rhonda and Michelle said their goodnights and headed off to bed. Which was funny, since I had been exhausted at the end of the gala. As I headed to the elevator after finally getting my water, I realized I was too wound up to even try to sleep, so I changed directions and headed out the front door and around to the left to the beautifully lit footpath, the one I had originally met Rhonda and Michelle on when Presley, Tillie, and I had been walking our first night. I thought I could walk off some of my energy and enjoy the beautiful evening. The temperature had cooled, but it wasn't too chilly, and walking would warm me up. As I headed down the path, gazing at how it wound through the grounds with the beautiful landscape lighting, I couldn't help but grin. Even though much of my time had been consumed with trying to figure out who'd murdered Cassandra instead of focusing on the conference, I really did have a ton of ideas that I thought would benefit Read Wine. Plus, I had met two great people, Presley and Tillie. That in itself was priceless in my opinion. Maybe I was being too hard on myself by thinking I was not dedicating enough time to the conference. I really had gained a lot of valuable information that would take me the next year, if not longer, to implement. I made my way to the halfway point of the path and decided to have a seat. Not that I was tired, but I was enjoying the outdoors so much I didn't want it to end. I took a seat on a bench and unscrewed the cap to my water as I looked out at a beautiful wildflower patch in front of me. It was a meticulously landscaped area meant to look like naturally growing wildflowers. But I knew enough about flowers to know someone spent a lot of time to make it look wild and crazy. As I looked around, I noticed a high heel shoe lying in the corner of the flower bed. Thinking it seemed odd that someone would lose a shoe out here, I leaned forward to peer closer and noticed there were actually two shoes. Had someone taken their shoes off to walk in the grass and forgotten them, I thought to myself, starting to laugh until something else I noticed caused me to snap back in horror. One of those shoes was connected to a leg. "Hello? Are you okay?" I called out loudly, standing up and feeling stupid because of course that person wasn't okay or she wouldn't be lying in the flowers without moving a muscle. I took a couple of steps forward, and when I saw who it was, I gasped. Susan Adams was clearly dead. Chapter 12. I stood trembling with a gathering group of people, mostly hotel guests who had been in the lobby when I had torn in there screaming for someone to call 911. I had left my phone in the room when I had originally come down for water, thinking I would only be gone a few minutes. Now that seemed a lifetime ago. I went back out to the path when the police and paramedics arrived to show them where I had found the body, and they confirmed what I already knew. Susan was dead. I watched as Susan's body was zipped into a nondescript black bag and taken away. A man about my age, who had a detective badge on a chain around his neck, walked over to me. "I'm Detective Rogers. Do you have a few minutes?" he asked. I figured that was rhetorical, but thought it was nice of him to ask in any case. "Sure," I said, shivering. "Are you cold? We can go inside," he said gently. I shook my head. "No, not cold, just shivering from the shock of finding a dead body." "That's understandable," he said, and then walked a little way from the crowd, motioning for me to follow him. "Just don't need everybody eavesdropping. I'm sure the gossip will spread fast enough as it is." "That's true. First Cassandra, now Susan. It is a little unsettling. Speaking of Susan Adams, you were just out for a walk and found her?" His question made sense for what a detective would ask, but I couldn't help but feel like it was a little bit accusatory, though I was probably overreacting. I was out for a late-night walk because I wasn't tired and I thought it might help me sleep better. I sat down for a moment to enjoy the wildflowers, and that's when I noticed a pair of shoes peeking from the flower bed. Since that seemed unusual, I went to investigate and found Susan, I said matter-of-factly. I knew from my interactions with Clive, the sheriff in my hometown, that all Detective Rogers wanted was the facts. "Did you know her?" I hadn't even heard of her before this conference and hadn't yet had the opportunity to meet her. Now I wouldn't have the chance to ask her what she had on Ashley, though I felt bad as soon as I even had the thought. The poor woman was dead. My curiosity being satisfied was not important. Detective Rogers made a few more notes on his phone and then put it back in his pocket. I think I have enough here for now. Are you staying at the hotel until the end of the conference? Yes, until Sunday. Good enough. If I need anything else, I know where to find you. Can I ask a question? You can ask. Although I'm not sure I will have an answer, he said with a slight smile. Fair enough, I said, returning the smile. Do you think Susan's death is related to Cassandra Collins' murder? Too soon to tell? But don't you find it odd that two people in the same industry would be murdered at the same conference? I pressed. Murder is always odd, Ms. Pristine. I try not to let feelings get in the way of the facts, and the facts as they stand aren't conclusive. Now I'm going to head back. Would you like me to walk with you? I started to open my mouth to say no. I was even more wound up than when I'd started my initial walk and knew I would never be able to fall asleep, but then I realized whoever had killed Cassandra and Susan could still be out there. Maybe taking a walk alone right now wasn't the best idea. I'd like that. As I headed back to the lobby with Detective Rogers, I couldn't help but think of the conversation I had had earlier with Rhonda and Michelle and how much they disliked both the women who had been murdered. However, they both seemed so sweet. Sure, they were angry, but angry enough to kill? Chapter 13. The next morning, I walked into the room where the breakfast buffet was and headed directly to the coffee station. I'd had another horrible night's sleep. I wasn't sure how much more of this I could take. I needed my sleep. Every time I had closed my eyes, I saw images of Susan Adams lying in a bed of beautiful wildflowers, cold and lifeless. I yawned as I grabbed a cup and put it under the spout of the coffee urn, flipping the lever and watching as the steamy, rich-smelling liquid filled my cup. I could feel myself already starting to perk up just at the smell. Coffee should be the main food on the pyramid as far as I was concerned. I got my coffee and then heard someone calling my name, so I scanned the room until I saw Presley sitting at my preferred table, up in the front. That made me happy. I waved in recognition, and as I headed in that direction, I saw Detective Rogers and two uniformed policemen coming through the door with a purposeful stride. I followed them as they walked directly to the table where Rhonda and Michelle were sitting with their morning coffee. Detective Rogers leaned over and whispered something in Rhonda's ear. Even from the 50 feet or so away where I was standing, I could see Rhonda's face go pale. Rhonda stood up and put her hands behind her back as one of the police officers put on handcuffs and they led her out of the room. The room was eerily silent, considering there were probably over 100 people at breakfast. I stood there not able to think or even make a decision as to where to go next. While I had thought, as recently as last night, that Rhonda would be an obvious suspect after spending some time in her company, I just didn't get the sense that she would go any further than what she had done already with her verbal outburst. Apparently, the police didn't feel the same way. What was that all about? Presley asked over my shoulder, and I turned to face her. Didn't you hear? Susan Adams was murdered last night, I said quietly, not wanting to broadcast the fact, mainly because I didn't want the questions I knew people would ask if they realized I had information. I relayed to Presley the events of the previous night. Presley's eyes grew big as I told her all I had been through after the gala. Why didn't you call me last night? You shouldn't have had to deal with that alone, Trixie. How awful for you. I smiled gratefully, thinking again that I was happy to have found such good new friends. We all went back to our rooms early so we could get some rest. The last thing I wanted to do is wake you guys up. I appreciate that, but still, what are friends for if you can't lose a little sleep for them? Lose a little sleep for what? I slept like a baby, Tillie said, having approached us and catching the tail end of Presley's sentence. I thought she did look like she had caught up on her sleep. Tillie wore a happy smile and she looked well rested. I was jealous. I was sure the bags under my eyes were huge. Presley quickly got her up to speed, and Tillie had the same reaction Presley had. Now I feel bad that I got the best night's sleep in probably 2 weeks while you were tossing and turning. Don't feel bad. I can catch up on my sleep later. I'm more concerned about Rhonda. To be honest, I don't think she had anything to do with it. What can we do to prove that? Tillie asked, and I had to smile. A good night's sleep did wonders for a positive outlook. I see Detective Rogers is talking to Ashley just outside the door. I'm going to go talk to him and see if he'll tell me anything, I said. You know he probably won't, Presley said realistically. Well, I did find the body. Maybe he'll feel sorry for me and toss me some information. The worst that he can say is get lost. I'll be right back. I walked determinedly over to where Detective Rogers and Ashley were finishing their conversation, and as Ashley turned to walk away, and Detective Rogers started to do the same, I called out, "Detective Rogers, do you have a second?" He stopped and waited for me to catch up. "Good morning," he said patiently. "What can I help you with? You arrested Rhonda?" "Yes," he said with his eyebrows raised, probably anticipating that wasn't the only question I was going to ask, and he was completely right. "Can I ask why?" "I would think the why would be obvious," he said, with a dry tone and a slight smile. "Well, yes, I get that you must think she murdered Susan. But can I ask why you think she murdered Susan?" "She just doesn't seem the type." "I've been doing this for quite a few years, Ms. Pristine, and the one thing I can tell you with certainty is that there isn't a type. If there was a type, catching criminals would be a lot easier. Now, if that's all." He turned to walk away. I put a hand on his arm to stop him. "Okay, point taken. But besides the outburst Rhonda had yesterday, was there something else linking her to Susan's murder? Do you think she killed Cassandra too?" The detective sighed, no doubt annoyed by my asking so many questions. "I'm not at liberty to discuss the inner workings of a police investigation," he said tiredly. "But I feel that, as the one who found Susan, you can trust me with a little information." I wheedled and tried to give him my friendliest grin. He shook his head, and I couldn't tell if he was exasperated or amused. I assumed probably both. "Ms. Pristine, I will tell you this. I think you should be grateful you own a bookstore and not a matchmaking service. Have a good day and enjoy the rest of the conference," he said and walked away. As I watched his retreating back, I couldn't help but think that maybe he had just given me a clue. If Rhonda hadn't killed Susan, which I really felt she hadn't, who else had it in for her? If the murders were related, maybe Rhonda knew who might have killed both women. And if Cassandra and Susan had the top 2 matchmaking services in Chicago, who was number 3? Was that person going to be next? Or was that person the murderer? Chapter 14. Anyone hungry? Should I order some snacks from room service? I asked Presley and Tillie. After Rhonda had been arrested, we had decided to skip the morning session. All 3 of us wanted to clear Rhonda's name and get to the bottom of the murders, plus we knew we wouldn't be able to concentrate even if we went to the session. "Sure. Snacks always help me think," Presley said. She was on my computer doing a Google search for matchmaking services in Chicago. I placed an order and then set the phone back down. "I feel bad taking you guys away from the conference. Are you sure you want to give up your morning for this?" "Are you kidding? How on earth could any of us concentrate on business with this going on? At the rate people are dying around here, the conference will have to end early. There won't be any speakers left," Presley said, laughing just a little. "I wonder if we should be at all nervous," Tillie said. "I don't think so. I mean, no offense to either of you, or even me for that matter, but we're all relative nobodies. It's not like any of us has some big company like Cassandra or was a huge competitor of Cassandra's, like Susan. I think Detective Rogers meant what he said, that it was a good thing I wasn't in the matchmaking business because everything that has happened here has involved people in that industry. Trust me, Read Wine is doing okay, but no one would have any reason to kill me for it." "Good point. Sure glad I decided to open a pet bakery, although matchmaking was never on my radar. I can't do a good job with that myself. Much less help other people," Tillie said and started to laugh. A knock came at the door. "It must be room service," I said and opened the door to find I was right. I showed the young man with a tray of snacks into the room, clearing a spot on the dresser for him to set things down. I signed my name to the bill and gave him a tip, shutting the door behind him. I walked back to uncover the food and started to rattle off choices when Presley interrupted me. "Forget about food. Come over here. I think I might have found something," she exclaimed loudly, and Tillie and I went to peer over her shoulder at what she was pointing to on the screen. "It's an article from last year written by the organization putting on this conference. They were doing a series last year where each week they would talk to the top 5 businesses in a certain industry and get a piece of advice from each to help other business owners. It was called The Top 5 from the Top 5, and this one was on matchmaking. Incidentally, some of the other ones I checked out are really good. You guys should read the articles on your respective industries." "Yeah, I'm sure you're right, but who was number 3 in matchmaking?" I said impatiently. "Well, number 1 was Cassandra, and number 2 was Susan." "Like we expected," Presley said, drawing it out. I poked her in the back playfully. "Stop with the suspense and tell us already," I said with an exasperated laugh. "Number 3 was Made for Marriage, so the company that is now Maids for Cleaning. That's what it says. Number 4 was Blissful Life, which we know is no longer in business. And number 5 was perfect partners. I talked to perfect partners when we divvied up that list, and the receptionist said the owner was on vacation, celebrating her 25th wedding anniversary. For whatever that's worth, Tillie shared. Well, that owner probably isn't at the conference killing people then, but I still don't think Rhonda did it, and that other company isn't even in the business anymore. This puts us right back at square one. Presley got up and headed over to the snacks. Stuffing my face helps me think, she said to no one in particular, taking one of the small plates and selecting a few pieces of cheese, meat, and crackers. From the charcuterie tray I had ordered, I walked over to one of the chairs in the corner of the room and plopped down. We're at a dead end, and I don't know what to do, but I hate to think of Rhonda in jail. Since there's nothing we can do, maybe we should go to next session, which starts in 20 minutes. By not thinking about it too hard, maybe something will come to us, Tillie said pragmatically. I didn't think I could concentrate on business, but I also didn't want to sit in my room and stew over a murder, or two, that I couldn't solve. Tillie did have a point. If we tried to think of something else, maybe an idea would come to one of us. I agree with you, Tillie, but first let's help Presley make a dent in the snacks. Chapter 15. I didn't think I'd be able to pay attention, but that was fascinating, I said to Presley and Tillie, as we walked out of the session we had just attended, called Storytelling, the best way to attract customers. I know, I merchandised the product at Silk according to season and trend, but I never thought of taking it one step further and creating a story that would evoke feeling like here. Wear this beautiful fall outfit and think of pumpkin spice lattes and walks in the brisk, cool weather, Presley said, with a dramatic flair. I started laughing. Me neither. We tend to have seasonal type things as well. Christmas books for Christmas, scary books at Halloween, love stories at Valentine's Day, but we don't take that next step, I said. What about you, Tillie? How do you think you could include storytelling into your pet bakery? I don't know. I agree the session was interesting. The speaker was engaging, but I can't help but walk out of every presentation feeling like a complete failure, and like I'm in over my head. I mean, I thought I'd put up a few flyers and maybe a Facebook page and that would be enough. I've been so naive, she moaned. Presley shook her head. If only it were that easy. I will tell you the hardest part about running my business is thinking of new ways to get people in the door, and I suspect that's true for every business. I nodded my agreement and then thoughtfully looked at Presley as she started speaking again. You know how people are obsessed with their pets these days, and most pet owners, especially dog owners, feel their pet is one of their children. There's no reason you couldn't tell a story to the fur parents of things to do to make their babies happy. Using holidays, for example, trick or treat for your pooch with costumes and snacks. Or for Valentine's Day, show your puppy love and have Valentine-themed treats. You're marketing to the owners, not to the pets. I know I spend way too much on my dog, Bella. I agree with Presley, Tillie. I bought dog treats in the shape of Christmas trees last year, and cost didn't really enter my mind. Tillie had a grin on her face. What great ideas! And you're right about not trying to market to the dog. The dog isn't going to come in and hand over their Visa card. I'm trying to market to the parents. I feel a little bit better now. Thank you. Don't ever think you're a failure. While you can think you're in over your head, personally, I think that's a perpetual feeling of any business owner because there isn't that direct deposit going into your checking account at the end of each pay period. You can't let it get the best of you, Presley said, and I nodded my agreement. I can't believe I'm hungry again after eating all those snacks, but is it time for lunch yet? Presley asked, patting her stomach. I think we're a little early, but we can head to the room and have a seat, I said. We started walking down the hall toward the room where lunch was being held. Crap. I left my notebook on the table back in the room where we had our last session, I said. You guys go ahead and grab a table, and I'll catch up with you in a minute. Are you sure you don't want us to come with you? Tillie said. No, go ahead, but feel free to grab me an iced tea. I turned and started walking quickly back to the room, annoyed with myself that I'd forgotten my notebook and hoping it was still there. It had all my notes from the last couple of days, and I would be really furious with myself if I lost it. I definitely didn't trust myself to remember it all if I had to try and recreate my notes. I opened the door to the room, relieved it was empty, and that it didn't look like anyone had been in to start cleaning up yet. I crossed my fingers that my notebook was still sitting on the table and made my way to the front where I'd been sitting. Yes, I said to myself as I reached the table, and my blue notebook with the rainbow on the cover and the saying, "You can do anything," was sitting exactly where I'd left it. I grabbed the notebook and stuffed it in my bag when I heard two voices yelling. The voices seemed to be coming from behind the stage curtain. I quietly got closer to the stage, thinking I might recognize the voices and wishing there was something I could hide behind. Whoever was arguing could come out at any moment and they would know I had been listening, but I decided that was a risk I was willing to take. After all, I thought, if you're going to argue and want it to be private, you should do it somewhere that's actually private. I got as close as I dared to the black curtain and pressed my ear against the thick fabric. "You have no idea how this is going to look for me," a voice that I finally recognized as Ashley's hissed. "You? What about me?" I was her assistant. The police have already been breathing down my neck. If we want things to go smoothly and for Robert and Anne to give me what is rightfully mine, we both need to lie low and not let this get to us. It's going to be fine. The second voice had to be Roxy, unless Cassandra had more than one assistant. I didn't recognize her voice since I'd only talked to the girl briefly. "I know. You're right, Roxy," Ashley said, confirming my assumption. "I wish we hadn't even started down this path. I feel I was better off not knowing Cassandra gave me up for adoption, but we're committed now, and we need to see it through. Cassandra owed you for what she put you through. You deserve to inherit her legacy, Roxy. Not Robert and Anne." While I was happy to have confirmation that second voice was Roxy's, I was flabbergasted by the news that Roxy was Cassandra's daughter. I distinctly remembered Cassandra's bio saying she had 2 children, so why would she have given up a third? What were these 2 women plotting? Had they done something to get Cassandra out of the way? And why would Ashley care about Roxy so much? I thought about the card Detective Rogers had given me and thought maybe it was time to make a call and fill him in on what I had heard. Chapter 16. I quickly rushed out of the room when Roxy and Ashley stopped talking. I didn't want them to catch me and knew once I made it outside the doors, I would be fine. I took a few steps into the hallway and breathed a big sigh of relief, then immediately thought I needed to find a quiet place to call Detective Rogers. I knew Presley and Tillie would be wondering where I was, so I shot off a quick text telling them to eat without me and I would fill them in later. Even though there were several little sitting areas lining the hallway, I decided to head back to my room to make sure I had privacy. Reaching the elevator bank, I impatiently pressed the button, willing it to go faster. It seemed to take forever and opened up to a group of women getting off, probably heading to lunch. They all had their conference lanyards on. Saying hello and trading niceties, the women got off, and I quickly got on, pressing the number for the 4th floor over and over, as if my repeated pressing would speed things up any. The minute I was in my room with the door locked behind me, I dug the detective's card out of my purse and punched his number into my phone. It rang twice, and he answered. "Detective Rogers," he said brusquely into the phone. "Hi, Detective. This is Trixie Pristine. I have some information you might find useful." "Okay," he said slowly, and I got the impression he was merely indulging me. "I overheard Ashley Houston and Roxy Andrews. She's Cassandra's assistant, arguing," I said, and told Detective Rogers word for word, to the best of my recollection, what the 2 women had said. "Are you trying to investigate this murder, Ms. Pristine?" Detective Rogers said. And while his tone wasn't necessarily terse, it wasn't very warm either. "Well, no," I stammered. "Like I said, I forgot my notebook and I just heard them arguing. It was a coincidence." "Detectives don't much believe in coincidences, and you asked quite a few questions earlier. I can't help but wonder what you're up to." "I'm not up to anything. Being curious doesn't mean I'm trying to do your job," I said, a little bit defensively since I wasn't actually trying to do his job, but I was investigating because I wanted to know what happened. "Okay, I'll take your word for it," he said, but I didn't think he sounded convinced. "Thanks for letting me know." "Hey," I said, not wanting him to hang up quite yet and feeling a little perturbed. He didn't seem to take me seriously. "Something else, Ms. Pristine? Do you think Ashley and Roxy could have had something to do with the murders? I thought you weren't trying to investigate." "I'm not. I just am curious," he finished. "Have a good afternoon, Ms. Pristine," he said and hung up. I sat there with the phone in my hand, a little annoyed at his abrupt brush-off. But I understood he had a job to do, just like I did. And while my real job might not be investigating, I knew now there was no way I could just let this go without trying to figure out who the killer was, especially now that I knew Cassandra had secrets. Chapter 17. Fueled by Detective Rogers' brush-off, I decided I was going to confront Ashley myself and try to get some answers. Maybe confront was too strong a word, but I was going to go ask her about her relationship with Roxy and see what she had to say for herself. Then I wanted to talk to Roxy. Maybe by talking to them both and comparing stories, something might bubble to the surface. I headed down to the first floor where I knew the resort offices were located, but when I reached the lobby, I saw a very tired-looking Rhonda walk in and rushed over to her. "They let you go? Are you okay? Is there anything I can do for you?" I babbled on. "I could use a cup of coffee, but I don't really feel like seeing anyone right now. If you go get it for me, I will meet you back in my room and pay you back. That will give me time to take a quick shower." "I feel so gross," she said quietly, as if talking took a lot of effort. I couldn't imagine what she had been through. "Absolutely," I said, all thoughts of talking to Ashley and Roxy out of my head, wanting to help my new friend and learn about her ordeal from her directly. Rhonda headed upstairs to her room after giving me her room number and coffee order, and I went to the coffee shop to get our drinks. I added a couple of pastries, thinking Rhonda might be hungry or at least low on energy, and took everything up to the 5th floor where Rhonda's room was located. I banged on the door with my elbow, both hands full, and Rhonda opened it, a towel around her head and a robe on. "Come on in and have a seat wherever." "Let me just throw something on," Rhonda said, and headed back to the bathroom. A few minutes later, she reappeared in black yoga pants and an oversized pink t-shirt. She gratefully took her coffee from me as she sat opposite the chair I sat in. "I got a blueberry scone and a slice of banana bread if you're hungry." "Oh, thank you, but maybe later. I can't even think about eating right now, but this coffee sure hits the spot," she said after taking a couple of sips and tucking her legs under her. She looked a little less tired. "I don't mean to pry, and if you don't want to talk about it, just tell me so, but are you okay? The police don't seriously think you killed Susan, do they?" "I'm so glad to be out of there that I don't mind talking about it. In fact, it might even be therapeutic. I hate to bother Michelle. Hopefully she's in sessions learning something. If we ever have hope of restarting our business, I want to do it well, though at this point it seems less and less like a possibility." "I assume since they let you go, they don't think you did it," I said again. "I'm not sure what they think. I only know they didn't have enough to charge me, only to question me. I was told to check with them before heading back to Chicago after the conference to make sure I could leave, so I don't feel that is a very positive sign of how they feel about my innocence." "I'm sorry," I said, not sure what else to say. There really didn't seem to be any right words for something like this. "It's just life. You know, sometimes it's great and sometimes the hits keep coming and you wonder what you ever did to deserve such bad karma," Rhonda said ruefully. And I had to admire her spunk. I wasn't so sure I would see things in the same light if I were in Rhonda's shoes. I would probably be hiding under the covers, hoping it was all a bad dream. "If it helps, I don't think you did it," I said, and Rhonda gave me a slight smile. "Thanks. Especially since you don't know me that well, I appreciate your note of confidence. You just don't seem the type." However, when I mentioned that to Detective Rogers, he said there really wasn't a type with criminals. But I still stand by what I said. "You don't seem like a murderer." "Did he give you any indication when questioning you why they thought you were a suspect?" I pressed for more details. "I think it was all, what do they call it? Circumstantial. I did find out Cassandra and Susan were both killed with poison. I gave the police permission to search my room and my car, and they didn't find anything. The detective just kept asking me what length I would go to make them pay for taking my business. I told him that my outburst was very uncharacteristic for me, and yelling was the furthest I would ever go. I would never hurt anyone. It's not who I am. I don't think he entirely believed me, though I guess I can't blame him under the circumstances. In all honesty, I can see why they'd think you'd be a likely suspect. I asked the detective for information, and all he would say is that I should be glad I wasn't in the matchmaking service. So my friends, Tillie and Presley, you met them the other night when we were out walking, looked up the top matchmaking services in Chicago. It was Cassandra and Susan, then Made for Marriage, then your company, and then one whose name I can't remember. Perfect Partners, Rhonda supplied, and I nodded. We made a few calls, and the owner of Perfect Partners is out of town, so obviously that person didn't kill Cassandra and Susan, and I know you didn't kill Cassandra and Susan. I called the number for Made for Marriage, and it went to a business called Maids for Cleaning. The woman on the phone told me she had changed her business from matchmaking to a maid service. So who else in your industry might have it in for Cassandra and Susan? We sat in silence for a second, and then Rhonda sat up straight in her chair, looking intently at me. "What?" I asked. "You said you called Made for Marriage?" "Yes. And the call didn't end well. The woman who answered the phone was nice enough until I started asking about Cassandra. That's not surprising. Really? I exclaimed, now very curious. What happened? Chris and his wife Emily, that's probably who you spoke to on the phone, were clients of Cassandra's. They met 10 years ago through Cassandra's services, and they took what they learned from their experience to start their own business. Were they still on good terms with Cassandra? I asked. If you can believe the gossip, when they formed their own business, Cassandra was livid and changed her matchmaking contract to state that you couldn't open a business that would compete directly with hers if you used her services. People in the industry thought that was crazy mean. Who signs up for a service and has to sign a non-compete? Rhonda said. While I was thinking about this, Rhonda yawned, and I realized she must be exhausted from her ordeal. I should let you get some rest. No, you don't have to go, Rhonda said as she stifled back another yawn, and I chuckled. Yes, I do. Get some sleep, and maybe you will feel refreshed, and you and Michelle can join me, Presley and Tillie, for dinner. I'd like that. We exchanged numbers, and I let myself out. While I had wanted to let Rhonda get some much-needed sleep, I also couldn't wait to tell Tillie and Presley what I had learned and figure out the next step. Even though I had told Detective Rogers I wasn't interested in investigating, I couldn't help but be excited that maybe there was finally a solid lead. I had texted Presley and Tillie to meet me outside the main room after our respective afternoon sessions. I was dying to tell them about my conversation with Rhonda. You look excited. What's going on? Presley asked when she and Tillie reached me. We walked away down the hall, out of the throngs of conference goers, and I quickly gave them the rundown on what Rhonda had told me. Do you think this couple who ran Made for Marriage had something to do with the murders? Tillie asked. I doubt it, since they aren't here, I said. How do we know they aren't here? Presley asked. Good point. I asked Rhonda if she and Michelle wanted to have dinner. Let me text her and we can decide on a time and maybe get some more information on them. I fired off a quick text to Rhonda, and the three of us stood there talking about what we had learned in the previous sessions while waiting for a response. After about 15 minutes, I began to wonder if I was going to get a text back. Maybe she is still sleeping, I said. I wouldn't blame her, said Tillie. Should we just head to dinner ourselves then? I said. Let's. I'm starving, Presley said. As we went down the escalator, I couldn't help but wonder just a little if maybe Rhonda was avoiding us. Chapter 18. The next morning, I was in my room dressing for a walk around the grounds. It was an organized activity for the conference attendees. People could sign up for a self-care hour of walking and getting to know other people, essentially networking while walking. Although the suggestion was to get to know each other personally, not just talk business. Then, after the mile-and-a-half loop, there would be mimosas. I hadn't talked to Rhonda since yesterday. Since the getting together for dinner I'd mentioned hadn't happened, and I hoped I might see her today. I mainly wanted to make sure she was okay after her ordeal. I couldn't help but think having a mimosa after the walk might not necessarily be the healthiest thing to do, but I wasn't about to turn it down. Between the murders of Cassandra and Susan, and trying to wrap my head around all the information I'd learned, I was looking forward to a brisk walk to help clear my thoughts. I dressed in yoga pants and a t-shirt that said Read Wine Bookstore, and put on a pair of socks and my tennis shoes. I was glad I had packed my casual workout clothes. Although I had no intentions of working out while I was here, I had thrown them in my suitcase, thinking it might be a nice comfy outfit to wear on the drive home. I still had 15 minutes before I had to be downstairs. I grabbed the pad of paper and a pen from the hotel desk and headed over to my bed. Sitting down and swinging my legs up, leaning against the pillows and making sure to keep my shoes off the comforter, I wrote potential suspects across the top in capital letters and underlined it, followed by the number 1. Making lists always made me feel better. Maybe if I could make a list about this, I could get all the ideas floating around my head out and could stop obsessing over them. I tapped my pen thoughtfully against the notepad, eyes rolled up to the ceiling as if to find the answer up there. When nothing appeared, I looked back down to the paper and thought about who had the most to gain. I realized the two murders weren't necessarily related, so across the top of the paper I wrote Cassandra, and then halfway across the page, I drew a line splitting the page in two and wrote Susan at the top of that side. On the Cassandra side of suspects, I put Anne and Robert on the list. I had heard them argue, and being related to Cassandra, they could possibly have a lot to gain if she was dead. It made sense that they stood to inherit part of her business. I wrote down a number 2 and put Roxy. Maybe she was mad that Cassandra had given her up for adoption. But who would want Susan dead? I started to write a name and then hesitated, shaking my head. Although no one was around to see it, I felt a twinge of guilt for even thinking it. My gut told me that Rhonda did not kill Susan. But if I was looking at this objectively, Rhonda had a screaming match with Susan mere hours before she died, and Susan had control of Rhonda and Michelle's clients, who now might be free game. Still feeling guilty, I went ahead and wrote Rhonda's name down along with Michelle's next to it because they were both owners of Blissful Life. My phone buzzed with a notification of an email, and when I looked at the screen to see who it was, I saw what time it was. Crap. While I had been ahead of schedule just 15 short minutes ago, now I had 2 minutes to get downstairs. I grabbed my hotel key and slid it in the side pocket of my yoga pants, grabbed my phone and put it in the other, and headed out the door to the elevator. When I got off the elevator, I walked through the lobby and outside the front doors where everyone was to meet. I was surprised by how many people were there. Though mimosas were a great incentive to participate in a walk, I scanned the crowd for Presley and Tillie and finally noticed them to my right as they waved at me to get my attention. I rushed over to them and Presley said, "We were beginning to think you might have slept through your non-existent alarm," she laughed. No, I just got distracted." "With what? Work stuff?" Tillie asked. "No, I was making a list of potential murder suspects. I can't get the murders out of my mind. I thought if I wrote down on paper all the things swirling around in my head, I would be able to relax a little. Or at the very least, some great epiphany would come to me." "I'm right there with you," Presley admitted. "I'm feeling guilty for not focusing more on the conference to learn things to improve my business. Instead, I'm filling my brain with non-business related murders. I guess I have a habit of sticking my nose in police business. At least that's what my fiancé Cooper always says. I don't think we can be too hard on ourselves, though, because this is a pretty crazy thing to have happened, and we came here because of Cassandra. No wonder it's disrupted our focus," said Tillie. "You've got a point there," I said. "Did you come up with any good ideas?" Presley asked. "Not really. Anne, Robert, and Roxy are suspects for Cassandra's murder, but, what reason would they have to kill Susan? So then it might be someone different, or maybe it isn't. I don't know. I'm beginning to think this is going to be impossible to figure out." "Who did you put on your list of potential suspects for Susan?" Presley asked. I hesitated, not wanting to admit I had put Rhonda on the list, but apparently Presley realized what I was thinking. "You think Rhonda might have killed her because of their altercation the other night?" Presley asked. "Yeah, but I didn't want to put her down. I really don't think she did it, and I know it sounds ridiculous because I have absolutely no reason to think that, except that I just don't. I don't think that's ridiculous. Who knows why the gut feels what it does? But face it, often our gut is right." "Attention, ladies," Ashley's voice called from the front of the group, and I was surprised how loud she could be considering we were outside and she didn't have a microphone. "If you follow me, I will lead us on our 1.5-mile loop before we come back to get mimosas, of which there will be orange, pear, and cranberry. Ladies, I would like to suggest you find someone to walk next to whom you haven't met yet. Maybe even 2 or 3 different people. Circulate and remember, no business talk, just personal. This is about recharging and connecting as women, not just business owners." With that, Ashley turned and headed down the path with everyone following her like the Pied Piper. "You know, she has a point about mingling. Maybe if we all split up and get to know the other women, we might find out something useful," I said. "Good idea," Tillie said. "I see Rhonda up there a ways. I'll go catch up to her and talk to her for a bit. I know I met her already, but I haven't talked to her like you have, Trixie. Maybe I can get a different read on her," Presley said, and I nodded in agreement, liking the idea of getting someone else's opinion. I liked Rhonda, so maybe I was biased. "There's another woman who was at my round table yesterday when the ladies were talking about Cassandra. This woman defended her. Tillie, maybe you could go talk to her. You see that brunette with the short pixie cut and the blue pullover jacket?" I said, pointing in front of me until she nodded. "Her name is Patsy." "I'm on it. See you guys later for mimosas," Tillie said and walked away along with Presley. I looked around and figured it was too much to hope for that Roxy would be here. Because why would she? She wasn't a business owner. Maybe this would be a good opportunity to talk to Ashley. I stood on my tippy toes as I was walking so I could see if anyone was talking to Ashley in the front, but Ashley was walking alone. I got out of the line and walked briskly until I reached her. The sun was out and shining brightly, even though it was still fairly early. By the time I reached Ashley, my heart rate was up and I was starting to sweat. "Hi, Ashley," I said, and Ashley turned her head to the side with a grimace. Maybe she didn't want to be bothered by anyone, but that look quickly faded. "Is there something I can help you with?" she said, with what was definitely a forced smile. "I just thought we could talk and get to know each other. Isn't that what this is for?" "Well, yes, for you ladies in attendance. I'm not part of the business conference. I'm just an employee. You may not own a business, but you're still a businesswoman and you've got quite an important job at such a young age." "I find that inspiring," I said, and Ashley looked at me, as if she wondered if I was being honest or not. Even though I had an ulterior motive to talk to her, she was young for the position she had. It really was something to be proud of. "I'm afraid I don't have that much to share." "You would be much better off talking to one of the women back there," Ashley said, hooking her thumb behind her. "Okay, fine. Let's not talk about business. Let's talk about your relationship with Roxy and Susan," I said matter-of-factly, losing the patience to subtly tap dance around what I really wanted to talk about. Ashley snapped her head around to stare at me with big eyes, and I could definitely tell she was shocked that I was asking such a question. "I don't know what you think you know," Ashley said crossly, but I interrupted her. "It's not what I think I know. I saw you arguing with Roxy, and I saw you arguing with Susan. What I don't know is why." "Were you spying on me?" Ashley snapped, and I could see it might look that way rather than the coincidence it was. "No, I wasn't spying on you. Just think about it as being in the right place at the right time, or maybe, from your perspective, the wrong place at the wrong time. But the fact of the matter is that I saw you and I heard you arguing with Susan. Soon after, she turned up dead." I didn't think Ashley had killed anybody. She was a 20-something events coordinator. She seemed way too sweet, and I had seen her on stage as she was telling everyone what had happened to Cassandra. She had definitely looked rattled, but I did think she knew something that might give me a clue as to who did it, though. "Are you accusing me of killing Susan?" Ashley screeched, and I quickly looked over my shoulder to see if anyone else had heard, but everyone behind us was walking in pairs, or groups of 3, as instructed. They were clearly involved in conversation and not paying attention at all to what was going on in front of them, since none of them reacted to Ashley's outburst. "I'm not accusing you of anything. I just want to know what your relationship is with these women and why you were arguing with them." I was becoming a little exasperated. I couldn't fault Ashley for feeling she was being accused of something, but I wanted answers. Ashley let out a big sigh, but then she started talking. "I met Roxy when she booked Cassandra to speak here last year." "Then why did she share with you that Cassandra was her mother if you just had a professional relationship?" Ashley looked surprised that I knew that information but didn't say anything. "We got friendly. I was up in Chicago several months ago for a fun girls' weekend and went to drop off the contract for Cassandra's speaking engagement. That's when I met Roxy in person. I invited her to go out with my friends and we hit it off. We got close, and Roxy told me that Cassandra was her mother. I encouraged her to come clean and tell Cassandra, but she was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Being rejected. I kept telling her it would be better to know how Cassandra felt about Roxy showing back up in her life than to continue to work as that horrible woman's assistant while trying to get up the nerve to tell her the truth. You can't imagine the abuse Roxy put up with. Cassandra was horrible to her, to everyone who worked for her. It wasn't worth it, in my opinion. Her comment about abuse made my radar go up." "What do you mean, abuse?" Ashley rolled her eyes. "It's not like Cassandra beat her or anything. Cassandra was just a horrible person to work for. I've heard her screaming at Roxy so many times I lost count. She screams at everyone when things don't go exactly as she wants them to go. When she got here, she didn't like the direction her room faced. Instead of politely asking for a new one, she screamed like a banshee at Teresa at the front desk. Cassandra's attitude didn't seem to faze Roxy, though. She had the touch with her. Roxy was able to calm her down, placate her. I do wonder if she would have put up with that behavior if she didn't know Cassandra was her mother. In any case, it's a moot point now." I supposed it was a moot point, but it seemed a little callous to mention it like that. But I wasn't here to read Ashley the riot act on her manners. I was here for information. "What about Susan? What did she have on you that made her think she could blackmail you into getting more speaking slots?" I asked, and Ashley blanched. "How bad was Ashley's secret?" "It's a long story and not one I care to get into, but I didn't kill her." "What were you arguing about?" I pressed, but Ashley was saved from answering by another conference goer who came up to us. "Hey, Ashley, a couple of us had a question about something we hope you can help us with. If you two are done talking, I don't want to interrupt," the woman said politely. "No, we were all finished. Enjoy the rest of your walk, Trixie," Ashley said brightly, and took her chance to get away from me. As I watched her walk away, I became even more determined to figure out what Susan had on Ashley. Chapter 19. As I watched Ashley chat with the other woman, my phone vibrated. I looked down and saw it was Sally, my friend and business partner, so picked it up and continued walking by myself. "How's it going? Are things staying busy?" I said upon answering, feeling a little panicked, hoping Sally wasn't calling because something was wrong at the store. "Yeah, part of me will be glad when the kids go back to school because our afternoon iced coffee rush has been crazy. My parents never would have let me drink this much caffeine. But what about you? Are you learning a lot?" "Yes, I'm learning so much my head might explode, and on top of that, you won't believe what has been going on here," I said. I hadn't talked to Sally or Cora about the murders and didn't figure it was big enough news to have made our local Michigan stations. "What's going on? Is everything okay?" Sally asked, sounding concerned. She was definitely the mother hen of our group. "Oh, I'm fine, but there has been a murder here," I said and waited for Sally's response, which didn't take long. "What?" Sally screamed, and I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "Please tell me you're kidding." "Not kidding. Actually, it was 2 murders," I said, while wishing I was kidding. "Should you even be there then? Is it safe?" "Now you have me worried," Sally fired out in rapid succession. "It's safe. I don't have anything to worry about," I said, reassuring her, though, even as I said it, I realized 2 people had been killed, so maybe it wasn't as safe as I thought. Though I was pretty confident that someone had targeted Cassandra and Susan and that it wasn't random. Not to mention, if the police thought it was random, I would think they would cancel the conference. "So, who? What? What is going on there?" Sally fired out again. "Cassandra Collins was murdered." "Oh, wow," Sally said barely above a whisper, and I knew what she was thinking. She had watched Cassandra's motivational YouTube videos right along with me. All 3 of us had drawn inspiration from Cassandra. "I know. It happened on the first day. She collapsed on stage. At first, I thought maybe she fainted, but apparently she was murdered." "Maybe you should come home," Sally fretted. "I'm fine. If it wasn't safe, they would cancel the conference. No need for me to leave." I didn't want Sally to try and talk me into leaving, so I changed the subject. "How are things on your end?" "Well, there's actually a reason I called you. I hate to bother you at the conference, especially after all you've just told me, but I just couldn't wait until you got back. I didn't want to take the chance you might hear it from someone else." Now it was time for me to be concerned. Is something wrong? No, nothing like that. In fact, something is really good. Depending on how you look at it, I guess. You may not think so. "Okay," I said in a drawn-out voice, wondering what Sally was about to tell me and starting to feel a little nervous. "You know how I've been interested in real estate for a long time and started working part-time for Leon Lancaster in his realty office just for fun?" "Of course. I was there to celebrate with you when you got your license. Are you having a hard time juggling both? I'm sure we can work something out." "No, I haven't had a hard time juggling both. It's more that I don't want to juggle both," she said hesitantly. And I wasn't exactly sure what she was getting at, but I started to have a sinking feeling in my stomach. "I guess I don't understand," I said. "I don't want to work at Read Wine anymore," Sally said in a rush. I was stunned. The 3 of us, me, Sally, and Cora, had started the business together. While Cora was mostly a silent partner, that was how it had been from the beginning. Sally and I had been hands-on with the day-to-day operations right from the start. "Oh, please, Trixie, tell me you're not mad," Sally pleaded. "I'm not mad. I guess I just don't understand," I said, stunned and not quite able to wrap my brain around what she was telling me. "I love working with you and I love the bookstore. I truly do. When we first started Read Wine, it was exactly what I needed to be more independent after my divorce, and it was a joy to do it with my friends. But let's face it, you are the one passionate about books. About all of it, really. Cora handles a lot of the marketing stuff because that's her passion and her business. I really think real estate is mine. Leon offered me a full-time job because of how well I've been doing part-time, and while I don't want to leave you, I feel I owe it to myself to pursue my dreams. I've never had a chance to do that before." As much as this wasn't what I wanted to hear, she was right. She'd spent most of her adult life working for her now ex-husband and then the bookstore. Sally hadn't done her own thing ever. "This is quite a shock, but I don't blame you. I know Red Wine has never been your passion like it's been mine, and I can't fault you for that, but I have to be honest. It scares me to run the business without you." "Oh, you're never going to be without me completely. I will pick up shifts as long as you need me to. I'm not just going to walk away as soon as you get back and leave you high and dry." "So, what do you want to do? Be a silent partner? I'd rather sell you my third." I'm afraid if I don't, it will make it too easy to fall back on, and I won't give my all to real estate. That's nothing we have to figure out right now. I just hated to sit on this once I realized it was what I wanted. I didn't think that was fair to you. Plus, you know how everyone in town gossips. I was afraid someone would tell you Leon offered me a full-time job before I did. I appreciate it. Really, I do, and I want you to follow your dreams. We chatted about a few things going on at the bookstore before we got off the phone, but I could barely remember what they were, still reeling from the news that my friend Sally wanted to get out of the business. And while I did not blame her one bit, it terrified me to do it alone. Chapter 20. Is everything okay? Presley asked as I got off the phone. During the call, we had made it to the end of the walk, and she and Tillie had come to find me. I felt like I was in a daze with the bomb Sally had just dropped on me. We were in front of the mimosa station, but I had stepped off to the side while I was having my conversation, and Presley and Tillie had patiently waited with me. Now they could tell, I was sure, by the look on my face, that it hadn't been just a regular conversation. Yeah, everything's fine. I just got a bit of a shock. Oh? Do you want to share? Maybe we can help you, Tillie said compassionately. It's nothing bad, just scary. That was Sally, my best friend and one of my business partners, and she's just told me she wants to quit our business to pursue real estate. Are you upset about that? Presley asked. I'm not upset. She wants to follow her heart, make a career out of something that's more of a passion. I understand, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't freaked out by continuing without her. I would have never had the courage to start the business without her and Cora is already a silent partner anyway. So then it leaves just me to be the decision maker. What if I can't do this? You won't be alone? You've got us, your new friends, Presley said with a grin. I know, and Sally will always be there. I guess I am just surprised. I wasn't expecting anything like this to happen. Do you want to get our mimosas, or would you rather go back to your room and process this? Presley asked with concern in her eyes as she rubbed my back. Actually, I want to see if we can talk to Roxy. I can worry about running red wine without Sally later, I said and caught them up on what Ashley had told me. Neither Tillie nor Presley had anything new to report from the walk, so we decided to speak to Roxy together. We went up in the elevator, got off on the 4th floor, and started to walk down the hallway to Roxy's room. I had a thought and stopped walking. The other two stopped and looked at me questioningly. Do you think it might be a little intimidating for the three of us to show up at her door and ask questions? That's a good point. Why don't we just wait in your room and you go, Presley said, and Tillie nodded her agreement. Okay, I said as I pulled my room key out of my pocket and handed it to Presley. Wish me luck. I headed the rest of the way down the hall until I got to Roxy's room. Once in front of her door, I took a deep breath to try and calm my nerves. Adrenaline surged through my veins. I was nervous to be asking Roxy about Cassandra for the second time after she'd made it clear she didn't want to talk. Here goes nothing, I muttered to myself and raised my hand to knock on the door. I could hear the TV, so unless Roxy had left it on before leaving, she was definitely there. Knock, knock, knock. I gently rapped my knuckles on the door 3 times. I only had to wait a second before the door opened. What do you want? Roxy asked, crossing her arms and glaring at me. I was wondering if we could talk for a minute. I told you last time I don't know anything, Roxy said, starting to close the door. But I put my hand up to stop it. A bold move for me. I wasn't even sure where it came from. Please, just a minute of your time, and I won't even tell anyone we talked, I pleaded. Roxy stuck her head out the doorway and looked down the hall. When she didn't see anyone, she looked back at me. Okay, fine. Come in. You've got 2 minutes. Roxy led me over to the little table and 2 chairs in the corner of the room and took a seat, leaning back, crossing her arms again. She didn't invite me to sit, but I went ahead and sat across from her. I didn't want to read too much into Roxy's attitude, assuming, with everything that had been going on, that Roxy probably wasn't herself. Well, get on with it. I don't have all day, Roxy said, interrupting my thoughts. Cassandra was poisoned. Do you have any idea who would want to kill her? Or Susan, for that matter, who was also poisoned, I said bluntly, thinking the direct approach would work best. Why do you think I know anything? Roxy snapped. Didn't I make it clear last time you accosted me in the hallway that I don't know anything? I recoiled a little at Roxy's use of the word accosted. That sounded predatory. Not at all how it had been. You were her assistant. She often said on her videos you were her right hand. If that's the case, surely you know who might have it in for her. There's a Detective Rogers investigating, and he has given me strict instructions not to talk about this with anyone. I promise I won't say anything, I pleaded, feeling Roxy was close to sharing. The look on her face was of someone who had something to get off her chest. Why do you even care? Roxy asked, her posture softening a little. She didn't look as obstinate. Cassandra really inspired me, and I guess I just can't move on not knowing what happened. As I said it, I realized it was the truth. While I had never known Cassandra as a person, I had looked up to her as a businesswoman, and to have come to this conference to see someone I idolized turn up dead, well, it really bothered me, even if what I'd learned about her since her death had been less than complimentary. Cassandra had a lot of enemies. The person that you saw on screen wasn't the person she was behind the scenes. What do you mean? I asked. Of course, this wasn't the first time I had heard that. It was definitely becoming a theme with people I talked to, but I wanted to hear Roxy's reasons. It was quite interesting how someone who ran a matchmaking service designed to bring people together could be so nasty as to end up pushing everyone away. I would have thought a different personality was needed to be successful in that industry. Roxy shrugged. She was outspoken and hypercritical. You know that saying, it's not what you say, it's how you say it? I nodded. Well, I sometimes felt Cassandra's goal was to say as much wrong as she could, and I got the sense she was mean on purpose just to get a reaction out of someone. Is that why you were afraid to tell her you were her daughter? I asked softly, and Roxy's head snapped back. How do you know? Darn that Ashley. Roxy slammed both her palms down on the table, shaking it. No, wait, Ashley didn't tell me. I overheard the two of you arguing. Oh. Roxy slumped a little in her seat, deflated. Why do you think she would have told me your secret? Because she's been on me to tell Cassandra. I honestly expected her to tell Cassandra herself, just so it was out in the open. It seemed to bother her a lot more than it bothered me. So you would be fine if the business went to Robert and Ann? Roxy's eyes flashed with anger. I didn't want anything from her, but Robert and Ann don't deserve anything either, the suck-ups. I take it you're not a fan? Cassandra definitely had her faults, but who knows? Maybe she got that way because of people like Robert and Ann. Not only did they come across so fake, I don't know how Cassandra tolerated it, but their relationship was just odd if you ask me. Your ex-husband is now with your sister, and they both work for you. Roxy shuddered. Way too weird for me. Do you think they would have killed Cassandra? Why would they do that? That would be killing the golden goose. Without Cassandra, neither of them would have anything. Maybe Cassandra was worth more to them dead than alive. Chapter 21. Don't they always look at the family first? You know, when people are murdered, I said to Presley and Tillie as we were sitting in my room following my conversation with Roxy. We were supposed to be working this afternoon and evening on a small assignment by getting together with a couple of other business owners to come up with the top 3 things we wanted to improve upon in our business. We then had to share it with our peers, brainstorming how to actually make that happen. But since I had returned and told them what Roxy had said, our attention and energy had instead gone back to the murders. Yeah, I mean, that's what usually happens in the Lifetime movie specials I watch, Presley said with a grin. Maybe Roxy did kill Cassandra. But then what reason would she have to kill Susan, I asked. There are 3 people here that are related to Cassandra. Roxy, the daughter she gave up for adoption 25 years ago. Robert, her ex-husband, and Ann, her sister. That is actually a lot of people related to Cassandra who might want her dead, Presley said. Not to mention Rhonda and Michelle, who lost their business. But what would be the reason, Tillie asked. Why does anyone kill? Is there ever a valid reason? Roxy could be mad she was given up for adoption, and maybe Robert and Ann stood to gain something from Cassandra's death, I said. You have a point. And Rhonda and Michelle simply wanted to get their disgruntled clients back, Tillie said, leaning forward in her chair, putting her elbows on her knees and her chin in her hands while closing her eyes, looking deep in thought. We need to figure out if any of them had anything to gain from her death instead of just assuming, or who might want revenge for how Cassandra treated them, I continued. That would be a real clue. How do you propose we do that? Tillie asked. I got up from where I was sitting on the bed and started pacing back and forth in the narrow space between the bed and the bathroom. After a few minutes of silence, Presley spoke up. I may have someone who would be willing to help us who has access to that kind of information. You know, if we want to find out who stood to gain from Cassandra's and Susan's deaths. Access to confidential information? You sure have interesting friends, I said, teasing her, but also very curious. Actually, it's my fiancé, Cooper. He owns a security firm and can usually find out anything us ordinary people can't. He doesn't normally like to poke around on people who aren't clients, but considering we're trying to solve a murder, maybe he will make an exception and check his sources. It can't hurt to ask. Presley reached for her phone and hit a button which I assumed was speed dial for her fiancé. He must have answered on the first ring because Presley immediately started talking. "Hey babe, how's New York?" she asked. The huge smile on her face told me it made her happy to talk to him. A feeling of longing filled my chest, which annoyed me. I had dated off and on since my divorce many years ago and had almost thought I'd found someone to settle down with again. But he had moved to California and the long-distance thing just didn't work. Since then, I hadn't found anyone interesting enough to spend time with. Normally, I didn't miss it, but seeing how excited Presley was to talk to her fiancé, it did make me long for that kind of companionship. "Things are great here. I'm learning a lot," Presley continued talking, "but I was hoping you could do me a favor." As Presley filled her fiancé in, I could tell by what she was saying and her body language that her fiancé was none too happy, that there had been murders, and that she was asking questions about them. Finally, after a few more minutes, Presley got off the phone. "That didn't sound like it went too well," I said with a grimace. Presley rolled her eyes. "I love Cooper to death, but he is such a worrywart. He just had to lecture me on staying safe and how solving a murder was for the police, not for me. Blah, blah, blah." "Great." "He probably thinks we're a horrible influence on you," I said, and felt kind of bad that someone I'd never met probably thought I was corrupting his future wife. Presley laughed out loud at that. "Oh, please, it's more the other way around. Trust me, he's probably afraid that I'm dragging you guys into this. I could tell you some stories. The bottom line, however, is he said he would get the information, but only if we promised not to confront our suspects with what we knew. But don't worry, I crossed my fingers when I agreed to that." Now it was mine and Tillie's turn to laugh. "He's going to call me back when he has information. Maybe we should actually do our assignment and work on our business, so we have something to report back," Tillie said practically. Presley and I nodded in agreement. "Never let anyone say we can't multitask," I said, but as much as I was excited to grow my business, I was just as interested in solving this mystery. Chapter 22. The next day, we were sitting in a session titled Hiring Smart. When I saw Presley's phone vibrate, she smiled and then picked it up, whispering hello. I frowned, thinking it was odd that Presley had answered the phone in the middle of the session, but she wasn't saying anything. She just nodded and then whispered, "Okay, thanks. I'll call you back in a bit." "Come on, let's go," Presley whispered to me and Tillie, and we both looked at her oddly. "But we're right in the middle of a session," I whispered back. "I used to be in HR. I can teach you anything you need to know. Now, come on," Presley said, and got up quietly, sliding her chair and grabbing her notebook. She headed toward the door at the back of the room. Tillie and I quickly and quietly got up and followed her out, not saying anything until we were all outside the room. "What was so important you had to pull us out of the session?" Tillie said. "Trust me, you're not missing anything. That speaker is horrible. The phone call I got was from Cooper, and he gave me some information that I think you ladies will enjoy hearing much more than listening to any more of that." I immediately forgot about walking out of the session, now more interested in what Presley had to tell us. "Well, don't keep us in suspense," I said. "It's about Cassandra's business. In the event that anything happens to her, 75% goes to Anne and 25% of the shares stay with Robert, who already has 25%. Her ex-husband has 25% of her company," Tillie said. "I sure wouldn't want my ex-husband to have 25% of my company, even though it's not worth anything right now. When Cassandra first started her business, she was still married. So my guess is he's always had 25%. I guess it makes a lot more sense that he's her business manager. Knowing that, you know what this means. Both Anne and Robert had reason to kill Cassandra," Presley said, "and greed is often the #1 motivator. But just because they had shares in her company, it doesn't mean they killed her. And how did Cooper find this out anyway?" I asked, totally impressed. "He knows where to look for such things," Presley said. "He just doesn't tell me where. Maybe Roxy knew this and was mad she wasn't going to get anything and killed her," I pondered. "But then she knew Cassandra gave her up for adoption a couple years ago. She had plenty of chance to kill her before now if that's what she wanted, don't you think? Plus, does it make sense that she would think she had any claim to Cassandra's assets?" Presley asked. "So, we're not really any further ahead than we were before," Tillie said. This is frustrating. What about Susan? I asked. Any information there? Presley shook her head. He said there doesn't seem to be any will on record for her. That seems a little irresponsible, Tillie mentioned. I wish we could talk to Anne and Robert, but there is no way to come out and ask what I would want to know, I said, my mind whirling. What, say, hey, did you kill Cassandra for the money? Presley joked. You're right. I don't think they would be receptive to that, Tillie said. No, not at all. But I have an idea, I said, smirking. Chapter 23. We need to get into their room, see if there's any evidence that would connect them to Cassandra's murder, I said. You mean like a vial of poison sitting on the nightstand? Don't you think they would have ditched it? Besides, the cops probably already searched the room, Presley said. Not necessarily. Unless they're suspects, the cops would have no reason to. Search their room, that is. Though you've got a point about them not being dumb enough to hold on to the evidence. But then let's face it, most criminals are dumb, I said. Maybe they are that type of criminals, if they are criminals at all. One of us could pretend to be Anne and say we lost our key, Tillie said. Don't they make you show your driver's license for that usually? I asked. Not if I left my purse with everything up there, Presley said. Tillie, that's a fantastic idea. I can get a duplicate key and one of you can keep Anne and Robert occupied while we look through their room. I'm sure I can sweet-talk my way into a key without anyone escorting me to the room. I volunteer to keep Anne and Robert occupied. My granny always told me I didn't know a stranger and I could talk the ear off an elephant, Tillie said. We just need to find them first. That might not be as hard as you might think, because I've noticed that every time we're downstairs they are in the bar, I said, and the other two ladies looked at me and shook their heads. I probably wouldn't have even noticed, but they're always sitting in the same spot at that corner table that's farthest out in the foyer. Anytime we come down the escalator or the elevator or from the coffee shop, that table is visible. It helps that Anne seems to favor bright colors. She's hard to miss. Presley started laughing. Yeah, I hated to pick on someone's fashion sense, so I didn't comment the other day when we talked to them, but she is too pale to be wearing vibrant lime green. So it's settled. Presley, you'll get the replacement key. Tillie will keep Anne and Robert occupied, and I'll wait up here for Presley to come back with the key. When she gets in, we can open up the adjoining doors so that no one sees me come in as well. That would be bound to stir up suspicion. All right, Tillie. Let's head downstairs and hope Anne and Robert are in their usual spot, Presley said. They left, and I couldn't help but feel a little bit nervous. Because what we were about to do was at least an invasion of privacy, and at most probably breaking and entering. I tried to justify in my mind that what we were doing wasn't going to hurt anyone, and if we were able to get closer to finding out who killed Cassandra and Susan, it was worth the risk. Who could get mad at us for that? After what was an excruciatingly slow 10 minutes of waiting, I finally got a text from Tillie confirming that Anne and Robert were indeed at the bar. Tillie texted that she was sitting there ordering a drink, and Presley was currently at the hotel desk. A couple more minutes went by, and Presley texted a thumbs up, and then that she was on her way. The nervous feeling in my stomach built even more now that I knew we were actually going through with it. It was all I could do to not stick my head out my door and look down the hallway. But that would look weird, and just in case anyone else saw me, I didn't want to bring more attention than necessary to the area. A couple of minutes later, I heard someone unlocking the deadbolt from the adjoining door. I had already opened my side when the ladies had headed downstairs. Within seconds, the door was open, and Presley was standing there. I can't believe you actually did it, that they gave you a key. You are good, I said. I had been really skeptical, to say the least. I imagined the hotel staff may have wanted to escort her back to the room to let her in and ask for ID then, which would have been a disaster. I just laid it on a little thick that I didn't want Robert to get mad at me because I was always forgetting things. The lady fell for it. Now let's hurry up. Tillie will text us if they start to head back, but this room isn't big, so it shouldn't take long. I stepped over the threshold from my room to theirs, and my anxiety level increased, making my heart race. I'd never done anything like this before. Well, there was that one time when I went into an unauthorized area of the police station, but I knew Clive, the chief, and if I had been caught, it wouldn't have been as scary as here. There would have been more of a chance to talk my way out of getting in trouble. What kind of things do you think we're looking for? Presley asked as we stood in the middle of the room. I don't know. While I'd like to hope for the obvious, Like a bottle with a skull and crossbones sitting out in the open? I doubt it will be quite that easy. Maybe papers or a computer with emails we could look at might shed light on their state of mind. You see a computer around here? Maybe we could search their history or email or something, I said, and we looked around for a computer. Dang it, I said, I don't see one. It's probably just not in an obvious spot. I learned from Cooper, because he travels all the time, that my laptop will never fit in the safe, but that I need to put it somewhere out of the way. So I usually stick it in a drawer underneath my clothes, just in case. Less of an enticement to steal by a shady housekeeper. Maybe Robert and Anne know the same trick. Genius! Presley went to the closet, and I went to the dresser. I opened the drawers. There weren't any clothes there, so then I looked around for suitcases, as they must not have unpacked everything. I don't see anything here in the closet, Presley said. I'll check the bathroom. Maybe they stashed it between the towels. I went over to one of the two suitcases and unzipped it. I felt a little creepy as I waded through the stacks of folded shirts and socks and closed my eyes as I stuck my hand under a pile of men's underwear to feel if there was anything hidden, but I came up empty. I started to get up to walk over to the other suitcase when I noticed something shiny between the mattress and the box spring. I reached in and pulled out a laptop. Presley, I got it, I said, and Presley came out of the bathroom. It was under the mattress. So they were smart enough not to leave it out in plain sight, but we're just smarter. Presley grinned, not looking at all nervous like I was. I didn't know whether to agree we were smarter or insist we were dumber for doing this in the first place. Let's just hope it's not password protected. Then all this would be pointless, I said, and opened the lid of the laptop and took a seat on the floor. The computer turned on and went right to the main screen. Not very smart. You should always password protect your computer, Presley said as she peered over my shoulder to see what was on the screen. Well, if there was any doubt that they are a couple, that picture would erase it, she said, as the home screen image was of Robert and Anne kissing in front of a fake picture background of the Eiffel Tower. This is just weird. But each to his own, I said. What should I look at first? The history tab. Look at the browser history, Presley said, and I did just that. We opened up the tab and scanned but found nothing out of the ordinary. A couple of banks, ESPN, a few TV streaming services, what you might find on a man's computer. At least I assumed it was Robert's because of the ESPN. That was a bust. Let's check his email, I said, and opened up the email program. The man was definitely meticulous. I didn't know when I'd ever seen an inbox with so many folders and so few emails. He must really stay on top of his email. I couldn't help but be a little bit impressed, considering I constantly missed things or deleted emails by accident and then couldn't find them again. I scanned the emails, and nothing really jumped out at me. Look at these folders, I said. He's organized, I'll give him that. But unfortunately, there is nothing labeled How to Kill My Ex-Wife, Presley said. How about that one? The folder labeled Debt. Money troubles are one of the motives for crime. I went to that folder and opened it to see many, many emails. Several that were from banks and were late notices and such, but then a few that were definitely not banks. Do you have your phone? I asked Presley, realizing I'd left mine in the room. Presley nodded. Take pictures of these emails. I handed the laptop to Presley, who started taking pictures of the emails. Then she said, Tillie texted. They've just paid their bill. All right, so hurry. I'm done, Presley said and handed the computer back to me. I closed the email program, closed the browser, and put the computer back where I'd found it. Okay, lock the adjoining door and then get out of the room. I'll open my door for you. My heart was racing, partly knowing Anne and Robert were on their way back up to the room, and partly at what I had just seen. Those emails contained several reasons why Robert might want Cassandra dead. Chapter 24. Wow, I exclaimed with a sigh of relief. I can't believe we just did that. Me neither, and I'm assuming since you had me take pictures of those emails that it might actually have been worthwhile, Presley said. Maybe. Send those pictures to me so we can pull them up on my laptop. A knock came at the door and I jumped up, startled. That must be Tillie, I said, after I had a second to calm down and dismiss the thought that hotel security were after us. I strode over to the door, glancing through the peephole to verify it was indeed Tillie before opening it. I couldn't help but feel a little nervous that maybe it was hotel security. Or Robert and Anne because they had somehow found out. It was with relief that I opened the door to Tillie. I definitely wasn't cut out for a life of crime. My nerves couldn't handle it. Tillie walked into the room and I sat back down at the desk in front of the laptop while she took a seat on the bed next to Presley. "Did you guys find anything?" Tillie asked. "That's what we're looking at right now. Great job on keeping Anne and Robert at the bar," Presley said. "No thanks necessary. Literally no thanks necessary. I didn't say anything to them. I enjoyed my glass of wine while they drank several by my count. I didn't have to try to engage them in conversation or even look their way. By the time they looked like they were settling the bill, it seemed like you'd had enough time to get whatever you needed. So no reason to make them suspicious by talking to them. Thanks anyway for hanging out down there just in case," I said. "So what's in the emails?" Presley asked impatiently. "Well, unfortunately, I can only see what's in the preview pane, but there were quite a few emails going back and forth between Robert and Rhonda. And from what I can see in the preview pane, it's not cordial communication." "Like what?" Presley asked excitedly. "From what I can piece together from the snippets of emails I can see, I don't think Cassandra ever finished paying Blissful Life for their business. Except, wait a minute, I just read another snippet where Rhonda says, 'What do you think Cassandra will say when she finds out?' That was sent by Rhonda, and that was the last email, which was dated," I paused and pulled up the calendar, "2 days before the conference." I leaned back in my chair and looked at Presley and Tillie. "What you think she's getting at?" Tillie said. "Do you think since Robert is Cassandra's business manager that maybe Cassandra told him to pay and he didn't?" Presley questioned. "That would make sense. Then what if Robert killed Cassandra because he didn't want her to find out he hadn't paid?" I asked. "Because looking at these other emails, it seems like he owed a lot of money to a lot of people. There are past due emails from 3 different bank credit cards, all in the 5 figures, totaling up to, holy moly, $96,000. I've never had credit cards that add up to more than maybe 15 grand. That seems excessive. What the heck was he buying for that money?" "Me neither. I can't even imagine that much unsecured debt," Presley said. "What if he was playing the robbing Peter to pay Paul game? Would he really have killed Cassandra simply to avoid getting caught?" I mused. "It kind of seems extreme. Maybe he thought he could sell his part of the business or leverage it in some way if she was dead," Tillie said. "Well, it is a lot of debt, but I just can't imagine killing someone over a few late credit card bills, or even by mishandling company money," Presley said skeptically. "You have a point," I had to agree. We sat in silence, and I was running different scenarios through my mind. It was hard to know at what length someone would go to keep a secret. My thoughts were interrupted by the vibration of my phone. The number on the screen had a Chicago area code. Let me get this. It's a Chicago number. Maybe one of the matchmaking services calling me back. "Hello?" I listened for a few seconds before I said, "Just hang tight. We'll be right there." I stood up and motioned for Presley and Tillie to follow me. "What's going on?" Presley asked. "That was Michelle. She said that she and Rhonda were in an empty room by the main conference room going over their notes before the next session when Robert came in and started yelling at Rhonda, accusing her of killing Cassandra. Michelle is afraid he might get violent and wants us to come down. I'm all for helping out, but shouldn't she call the police?" Presley asked, jumping up from where she was sitting so we could walk out of the room. "Maybe she did, I'm not sure. Or maybe it's not as bad as she thinks it is. There are 3 of us, so we can assess the situation when we get there, and one of us can call 911 if need be," I said. We stepped off the elevator on the 3rd floor and headed down to the small room where Michelle had said they were sitting. It was down the hall from the main room the sessions were held in. Several smaller rooms had been set aside as a place to do exactly what Rhonda and Michelle had been doing, working on their business. Before we even reached the room, I could hear yelling, and I sped up my pace with Presley and Tillie close on my heels. This did not sound good. We burst into the room to find Robert and Rhonda standing inches apart. Robert's face was beet red, probably as much from the fact that he had just been at the bar as from his anger, but Rhonda's was just as red. I doubted she had been drinking already. I could see why Michelle was worried, as things looked pretty heated. "I did not kill Cassandra," Robert spat out. "I never said you did," Rhonda retorted just as angrily. "You're the one who burst in here accusing me." "Then why did the police question me?" "Because, you idiot. You're not only her ex-husband, but it would have taken the police probably all of 5 minutes to find out how heavily in debt you are. How you've been able to hide it from your pretend girlfriend Anne this long, I don't know, and I don't care. I'm done with you." I looked at Presley and Tillie. "Does that sound like what I think it sounds like?" I whispered, and they both nodded. To me, it sounded like there was something going on between Rhonda and Robert besides the money that was owed to her. Or rather, blissful life. "What's going on, you guys?" "We could hear you all the way down the hall, and if we could hear you, other people can hear you. You're going to start drawing an audience, I said calmly, wanting to diffuse the situation. Regardless of what was happening or had happened between them, it wouldn't be in anyone's best interest to draw a crowd. What's wrong is I have bad taste in men. I can't believe I am actually a successful matchmaker when all I ever pick out for myself are losers, Rhonda said vehemently. If looks could kill, Robert would be dead on the floor. Rhonda, baby, don't give up on me now, Robert pleaded. Oh, can it, Robert? I was stupid enough to forgive you for lying about still being with Anne, and even stupider, because I was blinded by my own anger toward Cassandra to hide you not paying me. I can't believe I thought I was getting one over on her when all along you were screwing us all over. Me, Anne, and Cassandra, which made my life a living hell in more ways than one. But Rhonda, he tried pleading again. I said, can it, Robert, and I mean it, Rhonda yelled at the top of her lungs. What's going on here? Ashley asked, poking her head into the room. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Rhonda bit off and stalked out of the room with Michelle close on her heels. Anyone care to tell me what's going on? Ashley said. Robert looked at Ashley, chest heaving, before stalking past her out of the room. Ashley stared as his retreating back, and then looked to me, Presley, and Tillie. Her eyes were wide, and she kept shaking her head, but I had no idea what to say, as I wasn't sure what I had just witnessed either. Chapter 25. Later that day, after the excitement had died down, I was walking across the foyer of Dusty Dunes Resort, heading to the gift shop. Even though this was a business trip and not some grand vacation, I still wanted to try to find something to take back to Cody. Whether it be an obnoxious t-shirt like, my mom went to the Dusty Dunes Resort and all I got was this stupid t-shirt, or something else equally as corny, he would at least know I was thinking about him. This was the second to last day of the conference. Tomorrow was a half day with a morning session and then a closing keynote during lunch. I couldn't help but wonder, in light of everything that had gone on, who the closing keynote speaker would be after the last two had turned up dead. Who would even want the job? I grimaced, finding it unsettling. I was also frustrated that I was no closer to figuring out who had murdered Cassandra and Susan. I realized that was silly of me. It wasn't like I was a detective or it was my job. I was here for a conference, not for sleuthing. But I hated not being able to solve a puzzle, so maybe that was why I was like a dog with their favorite toy, unable to give up the quest. As I walked past the coffee shop, I saw Helena and Patsy sitting there drinking coffee and decided to take a quick detour. Those two ladies had been fairly forthcoming about their opinions on Cassandra during their roundtable workshop. Maybe I could talk to them one last time to figure out who might have it in for Cassandra and Susan besides the people I already had on my list. I went and ordered my usual latte, not wanting to show up at their table empty-handed, and since it was fairly crowded, I decided to ask them if I could sit with them. It seemed plausible. I made my way through the tables until I reached Helena and Patsy. Can I join you, ladies? It's so busy in here. That way I can leave a table open for someone else, I said with a smile that I hoped looked friendly and inviting. Of course, honey, take a seat. We were just talking business, Helena said, patting the seat next to her. I slid in and sat my drink on the table. Please tell me your heads are about to explode like mine is, I opened with. And I wasn't lying. Murder investigation notwithstanding, I had so much information I didn't know what to do with it. It had made me realize how little I knew about running a business and how scared I was to do it without Sally. Oh, honey, that never goes away. Being a business owner is a constant ricochet of feelings between I'm awesome, this is awesome, I can do anything, and 5 minutes later you think, what am I doing? I should go work at Starbucks. I'm going to go bankrupt, Helena said, while patting my hand in a comforting way. Helena was a little older than me, probably Cassandra's age, but she had a great motherly aura about her. She's right. Just hang in there. Because the highs far outweigh the lows, even if it doesn't seem like it at the time, Patsy concurred. I know you are right, because even though it is stressful, I can honestly say I wouldn't trade it for the world. To be honest, I think I'm just extra anxious because of the craziness that has gone on at this conference, I said as a way of opening the conversation to the murders, mentally crossing my fingers they would bite on the topic. You've got that right, honey, Helena said. I've been a business owner for 20 years. And going to conferences for that same amount of time. Never have I been to a conference where someone died, much less two people. It's definitely been a whirlwind and has made it that much harder to focus on business. So don't be so hard on yourself. Oh, good. I'm glad I'm not the only one who has been unsettled by all this, I said, trying to strike the right balance between being curious and not seeming too curious. I needn't have worried, though, because the ladies were off and running about what had been happening. I just can't believe they don't have any leads, Patsy said. It doesn't give you much faith in the justice system. Let's be fair, Patsy. It's only been a few days, Helena said chidingly. I know. It's just unsettling to know there's a murderer on the loose killing businesswomen. I know this is probably tacky to discuss, but can you think of anyone who would want either of those women dead? I asked gently, and both women shook their heads, not seeming at all bothered by my question. I don't know what I had been worried about. Everyone at this conference had probably been talking about it. Cassandra wasn't my favorite person. Heck, she wasn't a lot of people's favorite person, but I can't imagine anyone killing her. We're businesswomen, not murderers, said Helena. Well, I, for one, am going to follow the news even when I get back home. No matter how nasty Cassandra could be, no one deserves to die, Patsy said emphatically. I want to see the killer brought to justice, for both of them. Well, so much for them being able to shed any light on the matter, I thought, so I decided to change the topic back to the real reason we were here. You do have to give that events coordinator, Ashley, kudos. She's done a really good job at keeping things going and organized, in spite of what happened. I would agree. She's handled everything and all the questions with a lot of professionalism, especially for someone so young. It really surprised me when I saw her get rattled yesterday by a simple case of mistaken identity, Helena said. What do you mean, mistaken identity? I inquired, my interest piquing. Patsy and I were sitting right here in this very spot when Ashley was walking across the foyer and someone ran up to her and called her Deborah and tried to give her a hug, gushing about how she hadn't seen her in a long time and where had she been hiding herself. Instead of doing what a normal person would do and just saying, "Excuse me, I think you have the wrong person," Ashley snapped. She practically screamed at the lady to get off her and leave her alone, that her name was Ashley and she had no idea who this Deborah person was. The woman who had come up to her looked completely flabbergasted. I really think she thought Ashley was Deborah. I mean, things like that can happen. You know they say we all have a doppelganger. I was simply surprised at how Ashley handled it, Helena said. Now I was really interested. Are you sure she said Deborah? I asked, my voice faltering a little bit with excitement. Oh yeah, plain as day. They were standing not 4 feet from where we are. At this news, I wanted to jump up and go find Presley and Tillie. Was Ashley Deborah Harris? If so, then maybe things were starting to make a lot more sense. Chapter 26. What if Ashley was Deborah? It would make sense that Roxy might know, as she would have seen or could have seen a picture of Deborah when she was stalking Cassandra. Maybe somehow Susan found out and that was what she was blackmailing Ashley for. But what did Ashley have against Cassandra? I took the elevator back up to my room. Gift shopping would just have to wait. Surely I might be able to find some more information on the internet. Deborah Harris probably had a Facebook account, along with Ashley for that matter. Who didn't these days? I reached my room, flipped open my computer, and then grabbed a Diet Coke from the mini fridge, popping the top and taking a drink before typing Deborah Harris into the search engine along with the word stalking. About a third of the way down the page were a couple of small articles from the year before about break-ins at Chicago matchmaker Cassandra Collins' offices and car, along with threatening emails which were attributed to a young lady by the name of Deborah Harris. According to the writer's sources, Deborah was upset over a match Cassandra had made. Well, that aligns with what I already know, I muttered to myself. Now I just needed to find a picture. I clicked on the Images tab to see if any of the articles had run a picture of Deborah Harris, but nothing with that exact name popped up. So I took to Facebook. I typed Deborah Harris into the Facebook search bar and found 2 profiles with that exact name, one in Kansas City and one in Barrington, Illinois. I clicked on the one in Barrington since it was a suburb outside Chicago, and it made more sense that that was the Deborah stalking Cassandra. As soon as the page opened, I was face to face with a young woman who was either Ashley Houston or her twin. I looked at the last post. It was dated a month after Deborah's arrest. I then typed Ashley Houston into the search bar and was met with the same face, albeit a different hair color, but it was definitely the same person. Deborah Harris and Ashley Houston were one and the same. I scrolled down to see when the account was opened, and it had also been 1 month after Deborah's arrest. So it looked like Deborah had reinvented herself. Maybe she had come here to get a fresh start, I thought to myself, but then felt it was too much of a coincidence that Ashley had met Roxy and befriended the assistant of the woman she had been arrested for stalking. It just didn't sit right, as a casual happenstance. I needed to talk to Roxy. I grabbed my key card and headed out the door, turning right to go to the end of the hall where Roxy's room was. I knocked heavily on the door, but Roxy didn't answer. I almost thought she wasn't in when I heard a loud noise. It sounded like something had fallen over and broken. I knocked again, even harder. "Roxy, it's Trixie Pristine. Are you okay?" I put my ear to the door, but everything was silent. I knocked again. "Roxy, I heard something and I'm worried. If you don't answer the door, I'm going to call the hotel front desk and tell them to do a welfare check." I didn't know if they would do such a thing, but I was worried and thought it might entice Roxy to answer the door. A couple of seconds later, the door flew open to Roxy with a wild look on her face. She was breathing heavily and sweating. "Get in here," Roxy snarled, and I walked past her into the room. She shut the door and slid the security chain. That movement gave me a bad feeling in my stomach. What had I just walked into? Chapter 27. "Go over there on the bed next to Ashley," Roxy demanded, and I complied. I sat next to Ashley in shock. This was not at all what I had expected. I hadn't thought that Roxy would threaten Ashley. Why would she? I thought it more likely that Roxy had killed Cassandra for giving her up for adoption and never acknowledging who she was, but it seemed as if I was wrong. "Why did you kill her? What did she ever do to you?" Roxy cried as she held a gun on Ashley. A gun? How had I not noticed the gun? My temples began to throb. Because she ruined my life. If it wasn't for her, Brandon would have come back to me. But instead, he forgot all about me because of the woman Cassandra set him up with. Ashley spat out, not seeming fazed in the slightest by the fact that Roxy was holding a gun on her in a cramped hotel room. That was okay, though. I was fazed enough for both of us. "Ashley, or should I say Deborah, don't you think if he really wanted to be with you, it wouldn't matter what Cassandra did?" I asked, knowing I was being somewhat callous to Ashley's feelings, but also wanting to distract Roxy. Maybe I could get her to let her guard down and lower the gun pointing in our direction. It seemed to work. "You know she's right, Deborah," Roxy said, looking at me but still holding the gun on Ashley, although it started to waver just slightly. "You knew?" I asked, completely surprised at this. "No, until earlier today. I was in her room waiting for her to get off the phone so we could go get coffee, and I went to her laptop to check my email. I saw emails addressed to Deborah Harris. Then I knew she was the one stalking my mother." Roxy seemed to have renewed her anger and held the gun more steadily on Ashley. "So you knew she was charged with stalking? And when she found out a year ago that Cassandra was booked to speak here, she created a plan to get a job and bide her time. And of course, befriend you," I said, putting the pieces together. I wasn't certain that was how the events had come together. It just made the most sense. The elaborate plan really surprised me, although I had to say I was impressed with the amount of patience Ashley had shown while carrying it out. Some marriages didn't last as long as Ashley's plot to kill Cassandra. "What I don't know is why she killed Susan," I said. "I didn't kill Susan," Ashley exclaimed indignantly, and now it was my turn to give Ashley my full attention. Roxy turned her way too, and the gun fell to her side. Ashley's comment seemed to surprise Roxy enough she had forgotten why she had been holding Ashley at gunpoint, and I wanted to keep it that way. Ashley's denial was a bit hard to believe, but judging by the look on her face, she wasn't lying. "Well, if you didn't kill her, then who did?" I asked. "I don't know, but don't you try to pin it on me," Ashley said. I looked at Roxy questioningly. "It wasn't me either," Roxy said. "I hadn't really thought that, but I was just at a loss as to who might have killed Susan." As Roxy finished speaking, she turned away from me and went to lift the gun back on Ashley. "I'm sorry, Ashley, we were friends, but you can't get away with murdering my mother. You know how much I wanted to get to know her." I seized the moment and jumped up, giving Roxy a hard shove. Then I swept Roxy's legs out from under her. Roxy hit the floor with a grunt and the gun went flying, hitting the wall and sliding under the bed. I ran in the direction of the gun, barely managing to get my hands on it before Ashley did. Ashley made a move, as if to snatch the gun away from me, and I backed up, bringing the gun up to almost shoulder level. This wasn't my first time handling a gun. I had recently started target practice with Sally and Cora just for fun. I hadn't realized how handy the skill would be. "Don't either one of you move a muscle," I said, and backed up until I could reach the phone on the desk with my free hand. I picked up the handset and pressed 0. "Yes, I need the police to come to room 429. It's an emergency." Chapter 28. A few hours later, I was in my room with Presley and Tillie, catching them up on what had happened. After the police had come and arrested both Ashley and Roxy, I was happy some resolution had come about, but still wondered who had killed Susan. "I can't believe Ashley poisoned Cassandra over a stupid boy," Presley said. "Me neither. Apparently, she put an entire bottle of crushed-up beta blockers in the kale almond salad," I said. Ashley had spilled her guts as the police were taking her away, and of course, I'd eavesdropped. "How did she get those?" Tillie asked. "You won't believe this. They were Cassandra's. Ashley knew she had them. She had picked up the prescription and then never put the bottle in Cassandra's room." "Wow, that's nuts," Presley said. "Ashley's nuts," Tillie added. "I feel like we should go find Rhonda and Michelle and tell them what happened," I said. "At least one of the murders is solved, and I think it would make Rhonda feel better knowing that Cassandra's killer has been caught." "But she wasn't a suspect in Cassandra's murder, was she?" Presley asked. "I don't think so. Just Susan's. But I still think she'd want to know." "Do we even believe that Ashley didn't kill Susan just because she said she didn't?" I asked. Though, even as I said it, I had to admit that Ashley really wouldn't have had a reason, and her denial seemed pretty sincere. But Susan did know that Ashley was Cassandra's stalker. Ashley said Susan had found out, and had been holding it over her head for preferential treatment at the conference. Who knew? Maybe Ashley actually thought killing Susan might pull suspicion further from her. "Well, I'm all for trying to find them," Presley said, and I shot off a quick text. While waiting for the response, we started talking again. "I have to admit I really thought it might be Roxy, but then I didn't know what Trixie knew." "About Ashley being Deborah," Presley said. "My money would have been on Roxy too. It's crazy to think the lengths that Ashley or Deborah, whatever we're supposed to call her now, went to set this up over a guy," Tillie said, shaking her head. "I was married for 20-odd years, and I wouldn't go to those lengths to get back at the hussy who stole my husband. As much as I don't like her, she wasn't the one married at the time," Tillie said with a grimace. "I hear that," I said, and then my phone vibrated. I picked it up, frowning at what I read. "Something wrong?" Presley said, noticing my look. "I asked Rhonda where they were and if she and Michelle wanted to get together for a drink, and she says they're on the roof. Is there a rooftop bar here?" I asked. "At least I think she said roof. She's spelled it Roff. It just says on the Roff. It seems odd." "Hey, let's go check it out," Presley said. When we got to the elevator, sure enough, there was a button that said Rooftop Lounge. I pressed it and then said, "In all the elevator trips, I never noticed that there was a rooftop lounge." "Because we haven't been moving on up," Presley joked with the line from the popular 70s sitcom The Jeffersons. We chuckled, and in a matter of moments, the elevator doors opened to the rooftop. But as we stepped out, I immediately knew something wasn't right. I was wondering on the brief trip up here why we haven't had any events on the rooftop, because a rooftop lounge sounds really cool, but clearly this is why, I said, looking at the signs that said closed for construction, reopening in March. "So why are they up here?" Presley said. "Maybe they brought their own bottle of wine and wanted to get away and relax," said Tillie. "Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now let's find them," I said. I started to call out Rhonda's name as we walked out of the hallway onto the sunlit rooftop patio, but what I saw made me freeze. Chapter 29. "But why, Michelle? Why would you kill Susan?" Rhonda cried out to Michelle. Michelle was standing on the rooftop ledge, which from my view didn't look more than a few inches wide. It made me nervous just looking at her. One wrong move and she would be tumbling down to the cement below. "Because we didn't deserve to lose our business, and this was our opportunity to be number one," Michelle responded flatly. I felt a chill down my spine as I looked at Michelle's face, which was completely devoid of any emotion. Michelle didn't look sad, or mad, or afraid of being on a narrow ledge with nothing between her and the cement 13 floors down. She just looked blank, and it was much more unsettling than any expression I had seen before. It looked as if Michelle had truly lost it. Being number one was never the goal, Michelle. We opened Blissful Life to help people find partners and be happy. It wasn't Cassandra's fault or Susan's that we hired an accountant who stole from us, forcing us to sell in the first place. As Rhonda was pleading with Michelle, I couldn't help but wonder what it was that had made Michelle finally snap. Well, it's too late now. What's done is done, and I'm not going to go to jail. With that, Michelle turned around on the ledge, so her back was to us, and took a small baby step closer to the edge. "Michelle, don't. We can still fix this," I pleaded. Michelle might be a murderer, but I sure didn't want to see her kill herself. "There's no fixing this. "I killed Susan and they'll throw me in jail for that," Michelle called over her shoulder. "Trixie's right. We can fix this. We can talk to the police and explain the situation. You won't get much time and I'll come visit you, and then when you get out, we can go back to the way things were," Rhonda said. I looked at her and couldn't help but think she must be crazy if she thought that would actually work. But as Rhonda threw up her hands in helplessness, I figured she was just saying it to try to calm Michelle down. It didn't look like it was working, as Michelle was still perched on the ledge, looking down 13 stories below. "You had a reason to kill Susan, but if you jump, you could land on someone. Do you want to kill an innocent person too?" I said, wincing as I said it, because the thought of Michelle jumping and landing on someone, killing both of them, was too gruesome to dwell on. I thought it might cause Michelle to rethink her decision, though. Michelle paused and turned slightly. "I didn't think of that," she said softly. "Oh, Rhonda, what have I done?" She started crying and stepped off the ledge back to the rooftop and into Rhonda's arms. For the second time that day, I called the police. "Wow, can you believe we've made it to the last day of this conference?" I asked. "Not really," Presley said. "This 6-day conference feels like it's been going on for weeks." "I second that," Tillie said. "Well, think of everything that has happened in a few short days. Not only have we learned a ton about business, but we solved 2 murders. Although solved is a strong word. More like we happened to stumble into things as they were unfolding." "I would say solved," Presley said staunchly. "We didn't just ignore the murders and go about our business. Had you not gone to Roxy's room when you did, and had we not wanted to talk to Rhonda when we did, who knows how things would have turned out. Although it's horrible that 2 people were killed, it's your actions that saved Ashley and Michelle." "I guess you're right. Am I horrible for feeling bad for Roxy and Michelle? I hope Roxy will get off easy since she didn't actually shoot Ashley." Michelle clearly wasn't in her right mind, and unlike Ashley, she seemed remorseful for what she did, I said, truly feeling bad for everyone who had been involved. Well, except maybe Robert. Rhonda had finally given us the whole story on that front. She had started dating Robert when he handled the sale of Blissful Life. She had no idea he had been sleeping with Anne, and when she found out and he told her it was strictly for financial reasons, she didn't kick him to the curb, a move she now regretted because she knew she owed it to herself to not allow herself to be treated that way. I feel bad for Roxy not getting to know her mother, though that whole family dynamic was kind of crazy, so maybe she's better off, Tillie said. "All I know is that I'm so grateful I met you guys," I said. "Even though I think we spent more time sleuthing than working on our business. The most important thing I came away from this conference with was your friendship. That's worth the entry fee right there." I smiled at both of them. Presley and Tillie nodded in agreement, and while I was scared to go back home and have the awkward and painful conversation with Sally about her future at Read Wine, I knew that I had made the kind of friends who would help me get through whatever challenges came along. The end. This has been Dunes and Dead Bodies, a Read Wine Bookstore, cozy mystery, Book 7, written and narrated by Laina Turner, copyright 2026.